Hey there, friends. I'm so excited to share a spine-chilling tale with you today. Grab your snacks, snuggle up, and get ready for a story about cursed objects and dangerous games. Picture this. I'm at an estate sale bustling with old treasures and hidden secrets. I spot something I just can't resist, something that seems to call my name. But little did I know that winning this item would change my life forever in the scariest way possible. As we dive into my eerie adventure, I want to remind you to leave a comment below about where you're listening from. It's always a blast to hear from all of you. And hey, if you're curious about a special dietary supplement that helps with wellness, click the link in the description below to learn more. You won't want to miss it. Now let's jump into the spooky story. It all started that fateful day when I stepped into the estate sale. I stepped through the creaky old door, the smell of dust and faded memories filling my nose. The estate sale was bustling with people, but I felt completely alone as I wandered through the crowded house. Everywhere I looked, there were trinkets and treasures, old books stacked high, dusty paintings on the walls, and peculiar furniture. It was like walking into another world, a world that held countless stories just waiting to be told. I had come to find something special, something unique, but as I explored, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The air felt thick and heavy, and I noticed the lights flickered now and then, casting eerie shadows that danced around me. Then, there it was, a small, ornate box tucked away on a shelf in the corner of the room. It caught my eye immediately. The box was covered in strange symbols and looked like something out of a fairy tale. I was strangely drawn to it, as if it were whispering to me. "Come closer," it seemed to say. "Take me home." Without thinking, I reached out and touched the box. A chill surged through my fingers, and I jumped back, glancing around to see if anyone had noticed. But everyone was busy, lost in their own worlds. My heart raced, but I couldn't resist the pull of the box. I decided to bid on it, my hand shooting up in the air even without thinking twice. To my surprise, I won it. The thrill of victory washed over me, but it was quickly followed by a hint of dread. As I held the box in my hands, the strange symbols seemed to shift and swirl. I could almost feel the eyes of the other attendees on me, watching with a greedy glint. As soon as I got home, I placed the box on my desk, admiring it while also feeling a sense of unease crawling up my spine. I decided to open it, so I lifted the lid slowly. Inside lay a single old photograph, dusty and faded. It showed a group of people standing outside a quaint little house. They looked happy, but something about their smiles felt wrong. A chill gripped my heart. Suddenly, strange things began to happen. At first, it was small things, a missing sock, a flickering light. Then, the situations turned darker. I started hearing whispers in the silence of my home, soft but unsettling, as if someone were standing behind me, just out of sight. I tried to shrug it off as my imagination running wild, but the shadows in my home seemed to grow longer and darker each night. I began to feel watched, like a predator hid just outside the reach of the light. In the following days, my cat, usually lively, started hissing at nothing and darting out of the room. The air felt charged, almost electric, making my hair stand on end. One night, I was laying in bed, heart racing from the strange events. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through my house. I bolted upright, my heart pounding. I reached for my phone, the light bright against the darkness, and tiptoed out to investigate. As I walked into the kitchen, I found a jar that had fallen to the ground, shattered. But this wasn't the strangest part. Above the wreckage, the temperature dropped drastically, my breath visible in the icy air. I shivered and looked around, feeling a presence looming around me. Everything started to spiral out of control. When I tried to return the box to the estate sale, the workers laughed. They told me there was no returning items from the auction, something I had never heard before. I was stunned, my mind racing. I felt trapped, realizing I was now a part of something much larger and darker than I could comprehend. As the days went by, more bizarre events unfolded. I started to notice unsettling shadows in every corner of my vision. I would sometimes catch glimpses of figures standing just outside my windows. Panic filled my thoughts. I tried to confide in friends, but when I explained what was happening, They laughed nervously, brushing me off as if I were merely seeking attention. I felt increasingly isolated, haunted by the sense that the box was tied to my fate. One evening, driven by fear and desperation, I made a decision to learn more about the box. I went online, searching for old records or stories about it. To my horror, I uncovered tales about the auction I had attended, a facade for selling cursed objects that brought misfortune to those who owned them. My heart sank as I connected the dots. My entire life had taken a dark turn since that very moment I bid on that item. With trembling hands, I looked at the box again, its presence overpowering yet alluring. I felt like a moth drawn to a flame. Chills ran down my spine as I reached for it, knowing deep down that this was no ordinary object. I was unraveling a mystery wrapped in danger, and in its depths lay something I could only guess, something terrifying. The shadows around me grew darker as I leaned closer to the box, feeling an odd pull, a whisper leading me deeper into the unknown. As I opened it again in search of answers, the photo reappeared, but this time it was different. The faces smiled wider, their eyes glinting, no longer just sentinels of happiness, but hints of something far more sinister. The reality of my situation crashed down on me. I was trapped in a game, one I never wanted to play. The entire house felt like it was closing in around me. The whispers grew chaotic, surrounding me as I stood frozen in place, the box glowing faintly in my hands. I realized I had to find a way to break free, or I might lose myself to whatever darkness lay within. A whimper escaped my lips, and suddenly, the box slammed shut, the sound echoing like a heartbeat in the silence. I stumbled back, heart racing, and just then, I noticed a flickering light above. But I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in the shadows, something was watching, lurking, waiting for me to make my next move. I swallowed hard, a mix of fear and determination swirling inside me as the air grew cold and thick. What was I going to do? Would I escape the curse? Or would this box take me deeper into the web of its mystery? There was only one way to find out. As I stood there, heart hammering in my chest, I knew I had to make a choice. The box felt heavy in my hands, pulsing with a strange energy that sent ripples of dread through my body. I took a deep breath, my mind racing with possibilities. What if I opened it again? What if there was something more inside, something I wasn't prepared for? With shaky hands, I lifted the lid once more. A gust of cold wind swept through the room, blowing out my nearby candle. Darkness engulfed me, leaving only the faint glow of the box. I squinted, trying to make sense of the shadows that gathered around me. Suddenly, the photograph inside shifted again, the once happy faces now twisted in pain. Their eyes seemed to follow me, filled with a sorrow that chilled me to the bone. My breath caught in my throat as I realized they were not just smiling anymore. They looked desperate, like they were crying for help. I dropped the box, backing away, but it felt like I was rooted to the spot. The shadows expanded, creeping closer, and I could hear whispers growing louder, tearing through the silence like a storm. They had voices now, echoing my name in a haunting chorus. "Help us! Help us!" They begged, resonating in my mind. I shut my eyes tightly, hoping that if I couldn't see them, they would go away. But their voices only grew louder, more frantic. I was trapped in a vortex of fear, swinging between the desire to flee and the need to understand what was happening. Suddenly, the ground beneath me trembled, and the walls started to pulse as if my house was breathing. My heart raced even faster. I felt dizzy and disoriented. I stumbled back, but then the light flickered back on, illuminating a shadow in the corner of my room. It was a figure, tall and thin, shrouded in darkness. Its features were obscured, but I could see its eyes, dark, empty voids that seemed to consume all light. A chill ran down my spine, and I felt an overwhelming urge to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. Slowly, the figure extended a hand toward me, palm open as if begging for something. I felt an electric shock go through me, a mix of terror and an inexplicable urge to reach out. I was terrified, Yet I felt an odd pull, a connection to this dark being. Then, a loud crash from the front of the house jolted me back to reality. I turned to look, the figure fading away as if it never existed. My heart raced as I ran to the front door, every step drenched in trepidation. My mind raced with thoughts of what could be lurking outside, what other horrors awaited me beyond the threshold. As I flung open the door, a freezing gust of wind hit my face. The night was enveloped in thick fog, swirling and twisting like a living thing. I peered into the darkness, desperate to find the source of the noise. My breath formed clouds in the cold air, and an unsettling silence settled around me, heavy and suffocating. It was then that I noticed the path leading away from my home, lit by an ethereal glow. The light flickered, beckoning me to follow. Every instinct told me to turn back, to slam the door and forget this nightmare. But what if I could find answers? What if understanding this darkness could set me free? With resolve I didn't fully feel, I stepped outside, the cold ground beneath my feet shocking me into movement. The fog enveloped me, wrapping around my body like a shroud as I walked down the path. It seemed endless, curling into the woods that surrounded my home. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the earth beneath me was pulling me deeper into its secrets. As I ventured further, I started to hear the whispers again, but this time they were different. They told stories of loss and despair, of those who had been trapped like me, who had made a choice similar to mine. I could almost see their faces in the mist, twisted in grief and sorrow. "Stay with us," they murmured, haunting and sweet. I shook my head, trying to clear my foggy thoughts, but the pull was strong. The glowing light ahead flickered again, illuminating what seemed to be an old well, overgrown with vines and weeds. The whispers grew louder, swirling like a wild wind around me. Look inside. They coaxed, seductive and chilling. I felt drawn to the well, my feet moving before I could think. It felt like I was standing on the edge of some great abyss, peering into the unknown. The well was old, the stones moss-covered and slick with dampness. Ignoring my better judgment, I leaned closer, the darkness below almost mesmerizing in its depth. Suddenly, a hand shot out from the depths, grasping at the air. Fear surged through me, and I stumbled back, gasping. But what horrified me most was the recognition. It looked just like the hand in the photograph, wrinkled and ghostly. It scrabbled at the edge as if begging for help. My heart pounded in my chest, my instincts screaming for me to run. But curiosity held me in place, anchoring me to the spot. What happened to these souls? Why were they trapped? I felt an overwhelming urge to help, but how could I assist those lost in darkness? As I pondered this, the whispers grew frantic, calling my name, urging me to make a decision. I needed to act, to break the cycle and uncover the truth. But just as I was about to voice my thoughts into the suffocating air, a loud snap echoed from the forest behind me. The treetops rustled violently, and for a moment, I thought I saw something moving among the trees, something watching me, lurking just out of sight. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I turned, my heart racing. The sense of being hunted washed over me, and I felt the grip of fear tighten around my chest. I was caught between two worlds, the living and the lost. The well called to me, yet the woods held untold dangers, ready to strike. Before I could fully process my next move, the whispers flared up in panic. "Leave! Leave now!" they cried, their voices blending into a chaotic chorus. I spun back to the well and felt a surge of energy, an impulse to run. I turned and bolted down the path, the fog billowing around me like an angry spirit. The forest loomed, dark and threatening, but I didn't dare look back. All I could hear was my heartbeat thundering in my ears, drowning out the whispers from behind. As I stumbled through the fog, branches clawed at my clothes, tugging me back, as if the forest wanted to keep me there. Each step felt like a battle against unseen forces pulling me toward the shadows. I could almost hear their laughter, cruel and mocking, teasing me for thinking I could escape. But I pushed on, the house finally emerging from the fog. I rushed inside, slamming the door shut behind me and sinking to the floor in a heap. The silence was deafening. I pressed my back against the door, gasping for breath, every sound ringing in my ears. Laughter seemed to echo from the shadows, and I quickly glanced around the room. Every corner felt alive with darkness again, the oppressive air thick with unseen eyes watching me closely. I needed to rid myself of the box. I had to stop the haunting. But how? With new determination, I grasped the box again, its presence feeling heavier than before. Sitting on the floor, I opened it, trembling. But this time, instead of the photograph, I found a piece of parchment, yellowed and ancient. It was covered in strange symbols, the same ones from the box. As I read the words slowly, I felt a cold sweat drench my skin. They spoke of binding curses, of sacrifices needed to lift them. I realized that whatever darkness had taken hold of my life was not just my own. It connected to all those trapped souls, pulling me into their never-ending torment. Now I understood. I had to make a choice to confront the curse and break free for myself and for them. But as the darkness closed in again, I wondered if I was truly strong enough. I realized that I had to confront the curse that had become a part of my life. But could I really face the darkness? Could I find the strength to free myself and the souls trapped in this nightmare? The air hummed with a strange energy. I could almost feel the weight of the eyes on me again, creeping everywhere, waiting for me to make a mistake. I looked down at the piece of parchment trembling in my hand. Its symbols twisted and morphed, dancing in the flickering candlelight. I could almost hear them whispering, calling my name in a voice full of sorrow. "Help us! Help us!" The echoes of the whispers wrapped around me, leaving a bitter chill in my soul. I knew I had to act fast. As I scanned the room, I felt the shadows stretching, closing in on me like a thick fog. I had to think clearly to remember what the parchment said. A faint memory of the stories I found at the estate sale flashed in my mind, tales of curses tied to past owners, people who had dared to hold onto the darkness. I took a deep breath and set the parchment down on the floor, gathering my thoughts. The room dimmed and then brightened all at once. I felt the sensation of being tugged in different directions. The shadows writhed silently around the edges of the room. They seemed to shift and bend, forming shapes that sometimes resembled faces, sometimes long fingers reaching out. I had to focus on the instructions. Binding, I muttered, recalling the words while staring at the parchment. A binding ritual. What would it take to break the curse? Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply, and I could see my breath swirling in the air. A familiar feeling washed over me, like icy fingers brushing against my skin. I jolted backward as the shadows coalesced into a puckering form, swirling like a storm trying to break free. My heart raced as I felt an invisible force press against me. "Join us." The voice was deep, resonating in my very core. It was not just a whisper now, but a command that sent waves of dread up my spine. I was being beckoned to join those trapped in the darkness, to give in to the horror and despair that clung to the walls of my home. Panic washed over me. I needed to remember the stories I'd read and what I'd learned. The parchment, it was shifting again, and I scrambled to pick it up. My fingers touched the symbols, and for a moment, the whispers faded, replaced by a memory, a flicker of knowledge buried deep in my mind. I had to gather 3 items to complete the binding: a lock of hair, a few drops of blood, and a token from a past owner of the box. Clenching my jaw, I knew what I had to do. First, I would need hair. Fortunately, my hair was long enough to sacrifice a few strands. I turned my gaze toward the mirror, hanging crookedly on the wall. As I moved to the mirror, I glanced back nervously. The shadows seemed to stand a little taller, like they were alive, watching intently as I prepared to do something I never thought I'd have to do. I took a deep breath, summoned my courage, and drew a small strand from my hair by pulling it tightly and snipping it with a pair of scissors I had thankfully kept in my bag. As I dropped the hair onto the parchment, I felt a slight buzz, a warm pulse that traveled through the air. I had started the binding, but the unseen force seemed to grow angrier. and the shadows lurked closer. Next, the blood. I kept thinking back to stories about sacrifices, what they had to endure, and what dark magic had been unleashed upon them. My hands trembled, knowing that this step was crucial. I found a small blade in a drawer and pressed it to my palm, wincing as the sharp edge broke the skin. The sting sent a wash of fear through me, but it was nothing compared to the terror surrounding me. I let the few drops fall onto the parchment, and immediately, I felt the air around me shift. The whispers returned, louder now, swirling in a chaotic symphony as they danced around the room. More! My heart raced as dread filled my chest. I had to complete the ritual, but as I looked around, something horrific began to happen. From the very air, shadows coalesced into something darker, something huge and looming. It grew more solid by the second, contorting and twisting like a jumbled nightmare. A face began to form, eyes glowing a chilling silver and a wide, toothy grin that sent ice through my veins. It was grotesque, an amalgamation of countless trapped souls, all twisted into one horrifying entity. It loomed over me, the dark mist spilling from it like water from a broken dam. I could feel its breath, cold like the grave, washing over my skin. "Join us," it rumbled, its voice a low growl that sent vibrations through the floor. Gritting my teeth, I fought the urge to flee. I had to finish this. I was not about to become part of whatever darkness had captured my home. I turned my focus back to the parchment, scanning my mind for the last item needed for the binding. A token from the previous owner. Panic hit me again as I scanned the room. The memories of the estate sale flooded back. I recalled the old lady who had been selling the cursed objects. She wore a necklace with a strange charm. It had caught my eye, but I hadn't paid it much attention at the time. I had to find something of hers. The realization struck me like lightning. I spun around, feeling the footsteps of darkness drawing closer. I had no time to lose. With the shadows shifting and swirling around me, I rushed to the back door, bursting outside into the chill of the night. The wind howled, and the fog seemed to have thickened, swallowing everything in its path. I made my way toward the forest where I remembered the sale had taken place. The path felt alive, branches plucking at my sleeves and tugging at my hair. The same whispers echoed in the air, urging me to turn back, but I pressed forward. Instinct built a fire of determination within me, a blazing need to break free of this curse. As I pushed deeper into the woods, I began to notice shadows flickering just beyond my vision. I could hear footsteps behind me, scrapes and whispers drawing nearer. Each time I turned, I saw nothing but trees and thick mist, but the feeling of being hunted pressed heavily against my back. Finally, I reached the clearing where the estate sale had been held just days before. It felt different now, the air charged with energy and uncertainty. I scanned the area, looking for anything belonging to the old woman. Suddenly, a glint caught my eye beneath the heavy branches of a gnarled tree. I darted over, fingers trembling as I brushed away damp leaves. My heart raced when I uncovered a pendant, the same charm that had hung around the woman's neck during the sale. I grabbed it quickly, shoving it into my pocket, feeling a strange warmth radiate from it, almost as if it were alive. But even as I clutched it, darkness moved at the edge of my vision. I could feel the presence of the entity from my house creeping closer, its eyes burning into my bag. "Why do you resist?" The voice echoed from within the mist, now sounding closer, more tangible. I took off again, heart pounding. The pendant in my pocket felt like a lifeline. But as I turned back toward my home, I noticed shadows forming into solid shapes, darting just beyond my reach, whispering my name. "Come play with us forever." They started to close in. As I neared the door of my house, I could hear others joining them, countless voices of those who had been ensnared before. In a frenzy, I burst through the door, collapsing onto the floor. I scrambled to the parchment covered in drops of my own blood and strands of my hair, adding the pendant as the final piece. With determination coursing through me, I pressed my hands against the parchment and shouted the words written there, reciting them as they echoed in my mind. By the bond of blood and hair, The past I summon. Darkness beware. A pulse of energy surged from the parchment, sending shockwaves through the room. The air around me crackled with power, and the shadows recoiled, swirling back as if struck by an invisible force. But the entity would not be defeated so easily. I could see it form again, the grotesque face peering through the darkness, anger radiating from it like heat. "No, you cannot take what is mine," it screamed, voice echoing through the room and shaking the very walls. The shadows writhed violently, and the air turned cold as a cyclone of darkness howled around me. I pressed harder against the parchment, my voice rising above the chaos. "Let the lost be free. Let the light return." The entity roared, and the shadows screamed in unison, their cries a chilling melody that sent shivers down my spine. In that moment, I felt a powerful energy soar from within me, igniting a brilliant light that erupted from the parchment, pushing back the darkness. The walls of my home shook violently as the shadows thrashed, but I held firm to my chain. The light expanded, engulfing the room in a blinding glow that illuminated every corner, every shadow. In a final surge of energy, I shouted the last words of the binding, my heart racing, pouring every ounce of hope, every shred of belief into the ritual. By the light, we shatter the night. With a final blast, the shadows screeched, and the entity lunged forward, but it could not withstand the power of the light. Suddenly, the darkness shattered, breaking apart like glass now scattered across the floor. In an explosion of air, there was silence. The glow faded, leaving me breathless. I collapsed on the ground, trembling and lost in the stillness of what remained. Slowly, I raised my head, looking around the now peaceful room. The shadows were gone, and the house felt lighter, cleaner, as if the weight of despair had been lifted. But as I sat there, the weight of what I had just faced crashed over me like a wave. Despite the quiet, a lingering sense of unease stirred in my chest. Had I truly banished the darkness? Or had I merely delayed what would come next? I held the pendant tightly in my hand, feeling its warmth pulse against my palm. It felt like a reminder of the battle I had fought, the souls I had tried to save. But could I trust it? And what would happen next? The night was still, but I sensed that the darkness was not truly gone. As I pondered my future, the lingering whispers fluttered around my mind, now softer, but still present. Will you join us? Or will you keep fighting? I didn't know the answer, but I knew one thing for certain. The fight was not over. I sat there on the floor, the silence surrounding me thick and heavy, but the darkness still seemed to linger in the air, creeping at the corners of my mind. I clutched the pendant tightly, feeling its warmth pulse in my hand, like it held a heartbeat of its own. What did it mean? Even as the room felt lighter, a chill ran through me, an uneasy feeling like the calm before a storm. I glanced around, half expecting shadows to leap out from the walls. My instinct screamed at me that something wasn't finished, that whatever I had fought against was merely biding its time. Suddenly, the room grew colder and darkness seeped back, snaking along the walls like fingers creeping toward me. I felt my heart race as I pushed myself off the ground, adrenaline rushing through my veins. "Not again," I whispered. I backed toward the door, but it creaked open before I reached it, revealing nothing but a deeper darkness outside, beyond the threshold. The air trembled, and a whisper brushed past my ear, a sound so soft yet so disquieting it sent shivers down my spine. "Stay!" Had they returned? The trapped spirits? In that moment, I remembered the stories I had read about the pendant. It was said to connect the wearer to the past owners of that cursed box, binding them in both life and death. What if it was also the key to unlocking something even more sinister? I took a step back and blinked, trying to clear my mind of the images swirling there. Faces twisted in torment, their whispers begging for release. I needed to find out more, to understand what was happening. With a newfound determination, I pushed the door open wider and stepped outside once more, the fog rolling in thick and heavy around me like a shroud. Each step felt like a battle, my feet sinking into the soaked earth beneath them. The forest loomed around me, the trees standing tall and silent, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, as if trying to claw me back into the darkness. I whirled around, convinced I had heard movement from behind, but there was nothing but the wind rustling the leaves. Focus, I muttered under my breath, forcing myself to soldier on. I needed to find answers, and the pendant felt like a lifeline, a guide to what I had to confront. As I made my way deeper into the woods, I could feel the oppressive weight of silence pressing down. Each breath echoed back at me. The path twisted into a nightmare, the darkness thickening with every step I took, shifting and swirling like a live thing. Suddenly, I came upon a clearing that seemed oddly familiar. My heart sank as I realized it resembled the very spot from the estate sale. The air felt charged, the ground damp from the mist swirling around my ankles. In the center, I spotted a crumbling stone well, the same one that had been there during the sale. The shadows danced around it, curving and weaving like phantom tendrils. Compelled to approach, I felt the pendant grow warmer against my skin, pulsing as I neared the well. I peered over the edge, the darkness below swallowing light, making me feel unsteady. It felt like something was waiting down there, something alive, watching. "Show me," I urged, desperation creeping into my voice. What would I find below? The souls? The truth? I reached down, letting the pendant dangle just above the opening. Guide me? The moment I did, the air shifted dramatically, the whispers rising to a frantic pitch. The darkness below swirled violently, and a long, pale arm shot up from the depths, grasping at the air like it was trying to escape. My heart raced as I stumbled back, fear clawing at my throat. The face of a woman emerged, her features twisted in anguish, eyes wide and pleading. "Help me," she screamed, her voice echoing from the well, chilling me to the bone. I recognized her instantly. It was the old woman from the estate sale, the one who had sold me the cursed box. "What happened?" I cried out, my voice trembling. "It's all my fault," she gasped, struggling against the confines of the well. I thought I could control it, but it consumed me. Her spectral fingers grasped at nothing, her eyes filled with terror. "Please, you must destroy the box. It's the source of all this darkness. If it stays, more will be trapped like me." Her words sent a wave of panic through me. Was this all my fault? In that moment, I realized I couldn't just bury my head in the sand and pretend it would go away. I had to confront it head on, but as I turned back to the well, the shadows began to swirl faster, rising like an angry storm, forming into the shape of the entity I had faced before, the very thing that had haunted me since I found the box. "No!" I shouted, fear gripping me. "Leave her alone!" Darkness surged from the well, wrapping around the edges of my vision, and suddenly, I was pulled forward. The entity roared with fury, its voice echoing with the combined screams of the tormented souls it had ensnared. "Do not listen to her. She's a liar." I stumbled back, fighting against the dark tendrils trying to pull me in. The well and the shadows around it flickered, the ground trembling beneath my feet. I was losing control. I knew that if I didn't find a way to break free, I would join the souls trapped in this nightmare forever. "Stop!" I cried, feeling the pendant pulse violently against me. In that instant, I remembered the binding ritual I had performed inside my house. I had gathered the essence of those trapped before, pouring my own strength into it. What if I used the pendant as a focus, a beacon to channel my energy? With renewed determination, I held it high above me, feeling the warmth radiate as it broke through the darkness. "By the light, I command you, release the souls." The vibrations surged around me, and the winds picked up, howling as the shadows shrieked in agony. The air crackled, and I felt the essence of the pendant entwine with the energy of the earth itself, creating a whirlwind of light that pushed back against the oncoming darkness. "Go back to where you came from," the entity screamed, rage echoing all around. I felt the darkness clawing at my mind, but pushed it back. "Your time is up." With a final surge, the whirlwind erupted, light flooding my surroundings as the shadows screeched and twisted, trying to break free. I closed my eyes, focusing on freeing the trapped souls, sending every ounce of my will into the pendant. The world around me shattered with a deafening roar. I felt the ground pull away, the very fabric of reality bending as the darkness hissed and howled, recoiling against the sudden light. And then, just as it had begun, silence fell, wrapping me in a blanket of calm. Breathless, I opened my eyes to find myself alone, the well standing silent as if nothing had happened. The woods seemed whole again, the trees swaying gently in a soft breeze. The pendant lay warm in my palm, no longer filled with chaotic energy, but a comforting glow. But as I stepped back, I still felt an echo of fear in my heart. Had I truly freed the souls? I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness would return, that the battle was only just beginning. Yet now I had the pendant, and with it, the strength of those spirits bound to it. What would their stories reveal? Would I be their savior? Or was I just another piece in a larger game? Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, whispering promises of power and despair. With a determined heart, I made my way back through the woods, knowing my journey was far from over. Each step was one towards an uncertain future filled with new challenges and dark revelations. But I was ready. As I made my way through the woods, the trees loomed around me like ancient sentinels, their twisted limbs shrouded in fog. Each crack of a branch and flutter of leaves seemed to whisper secrets, weaving a tapestry of dread that wrapped around me tighter with every step. The chilling wind picked up, swirling leaves in a frenzy, and my heart raced as a sudden chill raced down my spine. The pendant, still warm in my hand, felt like a remnant of the chaos I had just faced. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was alive, pulsing with energy tied to the souls I had tried to free. But what if I had only aggravated the dark forces instead? What if they were lying in wait, gathering strength to strike back? As I pushed forward, reality shifted and twisted around me. Shadows stretched longer, wrapping around the gnarled branches above, forming dark shapes that almost seemed to reach for me. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, that the fear I felt was a figment of my mind, but deep down I knew better. For just a moment, everything went silent, as if the forest held its breath. And then, all at once, a cacophony of whispers erupted, filling the air with incoherent murmurs, a frantic chorus that clawed at my sanity. "Help us free us, we're still here," I stumbled, feeling a powerful wave of unease wash over me. Knowing that the spirits of the well could still be lingering out here sent chills cascading through my body. I clutched the pendant harder, as if it could offer protection against the unknown. The whispers grew more distinct, and I began to discern familiar voices, echoing a terrible sense of betrayal and helplessness. "Why did you abandon us?" I froze. I recognized one voice, soft and desperate, as that of the old woman from the sail. Her spirit was not free, not yet. My heart sank further. Each step felt like I was walking through cement, heavy and slow, my instincts urging me to flee. Yet, I pressed on, driven by a mixture of fear and determination. There had to be a way to truly put the spirits to rest. Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of movement in the distance. A figure stood just outside the clearing, half hidden among the trees. It was cloaked in shadow, a dark silhouette that seemed to breathe in the darkness around it, pulsing like a living shadow. With each subtle movement, it drew closer, and I could feel a presence that made my hair stand on end. "Come closer," the figure beckoned, its voice smooth yet gravelly, carrying an undertone of menace that sent my heart racing. I hesitated. "Who are you?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady, but it quivered with trepidation. "I am the keeper of the lost," it replied, gliding silently into the clearing. Its features were obscured, but its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, drawing me in as if I were a moth to a flame. "You seek knowledge, do you not?" Fear clawed at me, yet I felt a pull, an insatiable curiosity. "What do you know?" "The spirits are restless, bound to you by choice and consequence. Their fate intertwines with yours. A chill slid down my spine as I exchanged glances with the figure. What do you mean? The pendant you bear is not merely a relic. The keeper's voice was like velvet, smooth yet unsettling. It is a key to the realm of lost souls. The darkness you faced is only a shadow of what truly resides within that box. A deeper hunger born from despair and anguish. The air thickened around me, the weight of its words sinking into my bones. I felt a wave of dread wash over me. If the box held something more terrible, what had I truly unleashed? So what must I do? I demanded, my voice wavering slightly. Return to the box. Do not shy away from the truth that lies within. The spirits will guide you. But be warned, the darkness despises those who disturb its slumber. A gust of wind whipped through the clearing, rattling the branches and sending leaves swirling around me. I squared my shoulders, feeling the heaviness of the pendant dragging against my chest. I will not be afraid, I declared, more to convince myself than anything. The keeper smiled, but it lacked warmth. Then prepare yourself, for your journey is far from over. The shadows will follow, eager to reclaim what is theirs. With that, the figure began to dissolve, losing form among the thorny night. Shadows rippled and danced, pulling back like a tide. Fighting down the rising panic in my throat, I turned on my heel and sprinted back the way I came. Each crunch of the twigs beneath my feet echoed in the stillness, reverberating with a rhythm of urgency. All around me, I could hear the whispers rising again, anxious flutterings like startled birds. Don't leave us! Help us! The voices faded into the distance as the path twisted beneath my feet. Finally, I broke free of the tree line, racing for my house, the place where it had all begun. But as I crossed the threshold and stepped into the doorway, that familiar oppressive weight settled around me once more. The air felt cold, stagnant, and a soft laughter echoed from the empty rooms, a sound that sent a shiver racing up my spine. No one was there, but I could feel eyes watching me, hidden in the shadows, waiting, hungry. I made my way to the basement where I had first found the box, the heart of the darkness that had ensnared me. Each step felt heavier. I gripped the pendant, its warmth grounding me, and just as I descended the last step, the box lay before me, untouched but ominous, as if it had been breathing while I was gone. I took a deep breath, pushing back the fear clawing in my throat, and reached out to open it. But before I could, the room shuddered, and shadows erupted around me, swirling in a furious dance, pulling at the edges of my consciousness as if to drag me down into darkness. Do not, a voice shrieked, a mixture of anger and desperation. Dread washed over me. It was the old woman. You cannot look inside. The truth will shatter you. But I couldn't stop myself. Despite the chaos, I lifted the heavy lid, and the air shifted again, growing icy. Inside, the darkness pulsed, revealing a mass of intertwined souls, face pressed against the walls of the box, their expressions a haunting mix of despair and anger. They cried out, voices filling the air like a storm. Release us! You have the power! The shadows froze, swirling in agitation as a terrible force pressed against me, gripping my chest until I struggled to breathe. What have I done? The shadows writhed violently, and for an instant, I could see them forming into shapes, twisted, anguished faces of those who had been trapped before, driven mad by their own helplessness. Help! They wailed, their cries echoing in the small space, clawing in my mind. With a desperate cry, I pulled the pendant from my neck and held it above the box. By the light within, I free you. Light erupted from the pendant, spilling into the box, illuminating the darkness that had consumed these lost souls. Let go! I yelled, forcing every ounce of strength into the light. The shadows screeched, twisting violently as the souls fought against their chains. They clawed at the walls, desperate to be freed. But they were just as desperate for revenge. The air crackled with energy, words of an ancient language spilling from my lips unbidden, and one voice rose above the others. sharp and raw. Join us, or we will consume you. Their desire for vengeance filled the room, creating a storm of rage, anger, and despair. And in that moment, I could feel it, the pull toward darkness, the power it promised. The pendant began to grow heavy in my hand, its warmth dimming. The box quaked, shadows swirling violently, and I risked a glance inside, only to be met with a swirling void, a black hole that threatened to pull me into its depths. I couldn't let it swallow me whole. I forced my hands back down, closing my eyes against the noise, the faces merging into a terrifying visage that filled my thoughts with chaos. Enough! I screamed, my voice breaking through the storm. And then there was silence. Nothing moved. I opened my eyes to find the darkness settled, but the weight of the soul still pressed heavy against my heart. I had made a choice, but I needed to know if I'd chosen wisely. With a trembling hand, I lowered the pendant back into the box, and the darkness rippled, trembling as if alive. Just as I was about to relent, a sudden surge of energy crashed around me, pulling me toward the edge of the box. The room exploded in noise, a cacophony of whispers and screams, and all I could do was hold the pendant tightly and hope that I hadn't made the worst mistake of my life. Opening the box again could either release their torment or consume me within their madness. With every breath, dread enveloped me, the echoes of their cries swirling in my ears. I had to choose, light or dark, freedom or despair. I stood there, trembling, feeling the chaos swirl around me like a storm. The box, with its heavy lid still ajar, pulsed in time with my heartbeat, sending tremors of dread coursing through my veins. The pendant's warmth washed over me, but it was not enough to fend off the cold creeping down my spine. I knew whatever lay inside was waiting, hungry for release or revenge, and I could feel its gaze on me as I hovered at the edge of the abyss. My breath came in short gasps. The whispers, now a blend of pleading and rage, echoed in the corners of my mind, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. Join us, they hissed, a chorus of desperate tones mingling together, their voices weaving into an unsettling melody that made my skin crawl. We will take you places you've never dreamed of: power, freedom, vengeance. The black void inside the box seemed to pulse, each beat inviting me closer, tugging at the edges of my will. Their promises teased my spirit. How easy it would be to lose myself in their embrace, to let go of everything that had hunted me since this nightmare began. But something inside held me back. I thought of the woman at the well, the joyless expression on her face, the terror in her eyes when she realized what was happening. I couldn't let that fate devour me too. With determination, I snapped the pendant away, holding it tightly in a fist at my heart. I will not be controlled, I whispered, summoning every ounce of courage. You will not take me. As if my defiance had summoned a storm, shadows writhed and surged from the depths of the box like ravenous beasts. Their forms elongated, twisting into grotesque shapes that reached out toward me, gnashing their ethereal teeth. Fear washed over me, a tidal wave that threatened to drown me in despair. I could feel their hunger, an insatiable yearning to pull me into their darkness. A shrill scream pierced the silence, echoing off the stone walls, belonging to no soul I recognized but resonating with a familiar anguish. Just then, the light from the pendant flickered, illuminating fleeting images of tortured faces, their expressions frozen in horror. I could see them more clearly now, eyes wide, mouths open in eternal screams. They were trapped just like the old woman. "Help us! Break the bond!" they cried, their voices rising to a deafening pitch that made my head spin. The primal urge to flee clawed at my insides, yet I forced myself to remain rooted, anchored by my resolve. I took a step back, closing my eyes, trying to beat down the overwhelming tide of despair. "Get back!" I shouted, feeling a strange power emerge from within. "I'm not yours." But the shadows swarmed before me, swirling into a vortex as the ground shook violently beneath my feet. The walls of the room trembled, dust raining down in a gritty cascade like confetti at a funeral. I opened my eyes just in time to see the darkness coalescing into a solid mass, forming a figure more horrifying than I could have imagined. A tall, gaunt creature loomed before me, its eyes glowing with a sinister light that pierced the darkness. It had no true form, shifting and changing, as if it were a mirror of every fear I had ever held. "Foolish child," it hissed, the voice like sandpaper scraping against my mind. "You think you can fight what has been unleashed?" A wave of despair rolled through me, but I felt the warmth of the pendant through my grasp, sparking just enough courage to confront the creature. "I don't care what you are. I will free them." The entity laughed, a jarring mix of mirth and malice. "You think you can save them?" It reached toward me, and I recoiled as its shadowy hand brushed against my skin, leaving a cold trail that prickled with fear. Each of them bled for power. It continued, its voice a metallic cadence that echoed in the chambers of my heart. "You will join them, willingly or not." My vision blurred as panic threatened to over. "Take me." "No!" I yelled, thrusting the pendant forward, desperately channeling its light, the only beacon in the oppressive darkness. "You cannot break the bond," it taunted, but I could sense a flicker of hesitance in its form. The light from the pendant blazed, illuminating the room in warm hues that pushed back against the shadows, if only a little. "Let them go!" With each word, hope surged within me, and the shadows recoiled, shivering like they were scared of the light. It was a crack, and I aimed to shatter it. I felt the air thicken, the shadows writhed in response as the figure's grip weakened. The screams of the trapped souls echoed louder, raw and pleading. I could almost reach out and touch their despair, taste the bitterness of their anguish. Each voice a reminder of what waited for me if I lost this fight. Drawing on every ounce of courage, I plunged my hand into the box, feeling the weight of the darkness coil around me like a serpent. The pendant pulsed violently, its warmth flooding into the void, igniting the heaviness within, forcing the screams to rise in a crescendo. "What are you doing?" the creature shrieked, its once confident tone cracking. "Freeing them," I screamed back, feeling their energy rise within me, gathering into a single storm of purpose. Suddenly, waves of light erupted from the pendant, illuminating the shadows in a blinding brilliance that hurt my eyes. I had one chance. I had to focus all the souls within me, letting their energy surge until I could contain it no longer. "You don't own me!" I shouted, and then I released it all. The box exploded with a burst of radiant energy as the darkness shattered, and I crumpled to the floor, the force of the explosion knocking the breath out of me. The room fell into chaos, vibrated with that throbbing energy coursing through the air, pulling at everything that had been connected to that box. I watched as the shadows twisted and reeled, their outlines fracturing. The figure wavered, fear replacing the malevolence in its eyes. "Stop! You can't! You won't!" It screamed, but it was too late. The brightness of the light surged, folding the darkness in on itself, until the very essence of the creature began to dissolve, inch by inch. At the center, the trapped souls began to emerge from the void, their ethereal forms shimmering as they pulled away from the darkness that had ensnared them for so long. The room brightened until I could hardly see. I felt their presence, a flood of energy coursing through me, lighting up my heart with undeniable warmth, joy, and finally, freedom. "We are free," they cried as one, their voices ringing like church bells in the stillness of the room, filling the air with a sound so pure it felt as if the world had shifted. Yet even amid their exultation, I knew something remained, a shadow lurking at the periphery of the victory. I could feel it whispering to me, reminding me of the darkness I had just faced and urging me that it wasn't truly gone. "Stay with us," echoed the voices, wrapping around me like a soft blanket. "Stay, and we will keep you safe." A chill ran through my veins as primal fear clawed at my throat. This newfound power felt intoxicating, begging me to surrender. But I had to choose once more. The light flickered, Shadows still lingered at the edge of my vision like smoke that wouldn't clear. If I accepted their offer, would I become just another lost soul trapped within the light? I knew I had to resist, to find my own way despite the noise that sung sweetly like a siren's call. Suddenly, the wood creaked under my feet, and a banging pulse reverberated through the walls, piercing the silence. "No!" I shouted, shaking my head against their pull, against the grip of fear. I staggered back, the shadows shrieking as they clawed their way back toward the walls of the room, ready to recede and reform. I understood now. I was more of a beacon than a prisoner. With resolve, I turned my back on the box, feeling the warmth of the souls as they began to flicker like wavering candles. Their light was fading. "Thank you," I whispered, pushing the whispering shadows aside as I clawed my way toward the door. "Thank you for your freedom." I had embraced the dark, but now I was reclaiming the light. As I dashed through the doorway, the room screamed behind me, the cries of angry souls melding into a gut-wrenching roar. I couldn't look back. The shadows surged, crashing against the walls, desperate to reclaim what I had taken from them. And as I escaped into the night, I could feel the darkness clawing at my heels, vowing that it would return. The journey to truly escape had only just begun. I stumbled into the night, the chill air hitting my face like a slap, yet I could feel the weight of the darkness shadowing my every step. The whispers still echoed in my ears, haunting reminders of what I had set free, and even though I was outside, the fear clung to me like damp fog. As I hurried away from the house, pain settled in my chest, a heavy reminder of the souls I had encountered. With each step, dread spiraled deeper, wrapping around my heart like a coiling serpent. I felt like I wasn't truly alone, as if unseen eyes were tracking my every move, wrapping around me tighter. I headed for the streetlight at the end of my driveway, hoping the glow would somehow protect me from the lurking shadows. But as I reached its faint light, I saw it flicker. A warning. Just then, the ground beneath me shifted like it was alive. I stumbled, catching myself just in time, heart hammering in my chest. A low, rumbling sound resonated through the ground, like distant thunder, but colder, more unsettling. "Please," I muttered to myself, "just let me get to safety." But as I looked back toward the house, a dark shape flitted past the window, a shadow stretching across the glass like fingers grasping for something lost. In an instant, fear ignited within me, and I turned to run, the air thick with urgency and terror. Each footstep echoed louder than the last, my breaths quick and frantic. The trees that lined the street seemed to sway in response to my terror, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands wanting to drag me back. I could almost hear them whispering to me too, their voices blending with the shadows trailing behind me. "Come back," they murmured. "It's not over." I shook my head violently, wishing I could shake off the lingering unease. Was I losing my mind? I could feel the power of the pendant still pulsing against my skin, a reminder of the choice I had made. It felt warm, almost like a heartbeat, and strangely comforting amidst the chaos. But then came the laughter. It was soft at first, like the fluttering of leaves, but it grew louder, echoing through the air until it surrounded me entirely. Startled, I looked over my shoulder but saw nothing. Not a single soul, just the oppressive dark pressing in from the edges of the light. "Who's there?" I called, my voice breaking the silence that had wrapped around me. The laughter stopped immediately, replaced by that same eerie silence. I felt the hairs stand on the back of my neck, as if something was coiling itself around my very being, waiting for the right moment to strike. In a panic, I quickened my pace, heart racing with every uneven beat. I had to keep moving, had to put as much distance between me and that darkness as possible. Flashes of light darted in and out of my vision, glimpses of lost souls crying for help. I shook my head defiantly, unwilling to succumb to their grasp. But the shadows seemed intent on keeping me tethered. They whispered my name through the wind, low and haunting, teasing me with promises of power if I only turned back. The ache in my chest deepened as the desire festered within me. Each step felt like a battle, the darkness pushing against me, and I could hear the ground splitting beneath me, the rumbles growing more intense, as if something ancient was awakening. Suddenly, a gale ripped through the street, forcing me to brace against it, pulling at my clothes and tugging at the edges of my mind. The trees morphed into dark silhouettes, their twisting bodies no longer comforting, but instead labyrinths of terror. I could hardly stand my ground as shadows erupted from the brush, swirling around my feet, cold as ice, trying to trip me up. In an attempt to drown out the terror, I remembered the pendant. I grasped it tightly and summoned the light within, calling on the warmth that had once ignited my courage. "Leave me alone!" I screamed, pouring my intent into the outburst. The laughter erupted again, unnervingly joyous amidst my panic. "Foolish girl, you think light can stop the dark?" The voice dripped with malice, slicing through the air and sending shivers coursing through me. Braving my fear, I closed my eyes, focusing on the warmth emanating from the pendant. The shadows pulsed around me, seeming to respond to my will, but that laughter, God, it didn't stop. It circled me, taunting, breathing down my neck as I fought against the maddening retreat of my sanity. "Embrace what you fear," it echoed, a siren song that promised strength, vengeance, satisfaction. "You cannot run from the dark. It is part of you." Just then, the ground shook violently again, and from the corner of my eye, I saw movement, a shadowy shape coiling up the trees, reaching for me with tendrils of darkness, curling around the trunks, pulling the very essence of the wood towards it. My heart raced as I felt the oppressive pull grow stronger, dragging me closer as the figure materialized into something more substantial. A grotesque form, twisted and faceless, stood at the edge of the light, its shape constantly shifting. I had to break free. With a surge of determination, I squeezed the pendant tight and yelled, "I won't be yours." A blinding flash of light burst forth from the pendant, illuminated by my declaration, momentarily disorienting the creature that had been upon me. The shadows shrank back a bit in response, their grip slackening, confusion rippling across the dark mass. "Give us your light," it hissed, words slithering like snakes through the air, "and we will grant you what you desire." "No!" My voice rang with authority, a fierceness I wasn't sure I possessed. In that moment, I felt the energy of the pendant coursing through me, giving me strength against the dark. "This is my essence. You won't take it." Once again, the laughter broke apart, shattering into echoes of desperation as the shadows recoiled, their dark forms squirming in the bright light. Sparks from the pendant exploded upward, illuminating the trees in a vibrant glow, each leaf glistening as if to awaken from a long slumber. Yet the creature only grew angry. I could feel its rage brewing, building like a storm ready to unleash its fury. "You think this will stop us? We are the hunger you cannot satiate." The shadows writhed painfully, and I realized they were trying to pull me back, clawing and tearing at my vestiges of light, my strength, as they surged forward again. The ground heaved, threatening to swallow me whole. I could feel despair wrapping around me as the air thickened, almost suffocating in its density. I braced myself, feeling the weight of it all suffuse my very bones. But the light remained warm against my heart, even as the shadows pressed on, drilling into my mind with their agonizing whispers. I refused to let go. "Fight back," I urged myself, feeling the tether of the pendant grow tighter, its light pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. "You are not alone." I took a deep breath, summoning the fire of my will, and charged toward the shadows with the pendant raised high. "You will not take me." A blinding explosion erupted from the pendant, scattering the shadows like leaves tossed in a hurricane. Screams filled the air, reverberating within me, shaking the very foundation of what I believed to be my reality. "Join us! Join us!" They howled in anguish, a horrifying symphony of desperation that clawed at my heart. Just then, I caught a glimpse of their faces, tortured, distorted reflections of my own fear. I felt their pain, almost overwhelming me, as if they were stitched to every dark part of my soul. "You belong with us," a voice cried, and it resonated deeply, vibrating through my heart with dread. My own feelings of anguish mixed with theirs, creating a web of terror that threatened to ensnare me. In that moment, tossed into a whirl of emotions and fear, I realized that my battle wasn't just against the shadows, but against the darker parts of myself, the despair, the loss. And at that instant, I understood what I had to do. I screamed, summoning all my pain and fear, pouring it into the pendant. "I release you," I declared, my voice ringing out into the night, cutting through the cacophony. "You will not take my soul." Light erupted around me again, blinding and pure, igniting the shadows and dispersing them like the darkness they were. The screams turned to shrieks, and I felt the weight lift, the air suddenly growing light and clear. "Go!" I shouted, feeling the energy of their anguish flow away from me, sending them back towards the void from which they had come. They twisted and turned in the bright light, trying to find purchase, but it was too powerful. The shadows disintegrated, their forms fading into nothingness, and I was left standing alone, breathless and trembling. But as the last echoes of their despair faded, the darkness lingered. I stood there, still shivering, the whispers quiet for now, but I knew they were waiting, watching from the edges like wolves in the night. A formidable sense of dread settled in my gut. The shadows had been fought, temporarily defeated, but deep down, I felt something far more sinister had been awakened, and it wouldn't stop chasing me so easily. I felt the weight of silence pressing down after the last remnants of darkness dissolved into the night. The air around me was still, but I knew better than to let my guard down. Something deep inside gnawed at me, whispering that this battle was just the beginning. As the glow of the pendant dimmed, I glanced at the house again, the shadows now absent, though an unsettling presence remained. The streets felt too quiet, as if the world held its breath, waiting for what came next. My pulse quickened, and I began to back away from the crumbling outline of my home, unsure if I should go back inside or flee into the unknown. Suddenly, I noticed a figure standing at the edge of my yard, only slightly illuminated by the remaining light of the street lamp. Its form was slight and indistinct, swaying gently like a branch in the wind, yet it felt powerful in its stillness. I squinted, trying to discern more, but the figure melted into the shadows, pulled away by the night. My heart raced as I called out, "Who's there?" Silence greeted my voice. As minutes crept by, my instinct screamed to flee, to run as fast as I could, and yet curiosity dug its claws in. What if they needed help? But as I took a step forward, the shadows surged again at my heels, yanking at my ankles, urging me to turn back. Real fear rooted me in place, and my body weighed heavy, as if the very ground was drawing me down into its depths. I decided to back away slowly, but before I could turn, something cold brushed against my neck. My breath caught in my throat, icy fingers creeping over my skin like a slithering serpent, stealing the warmth away. I spun around, but there was nothing there, just the dark expanse of my yard swallowing the light. I shivered, the pendant's glow flickering unsteadily, and I realized that whatever had settled here hadn't left. It lingered, emboldened by my fear. Trying to shake the cold sensation, I felt a wave of determination wash over me. "I'm not afraid of you," I shouted into the night, feeling my voice resonate in the empty streets. Maybe that's what the darkness wanted, fear. This time I didn't back down. I raised the pendant higher, and a pulse of warmth throbbed from within, illuminating the space around me just a little more. But the shadows flared to life, twisting into shapes that felt all too familiar. Faces of the lost souls, their mouths open in silent screams, as they formed a wall of dark emotion before me. "Why did you leave us?" Their voices sounded like rustling leaves, nearly drowned out by the wind. "You can't escape the darkness. It is your bond," a deep voice echoed, resonating like thunder rumbling from deep within the earth. The figure from before materialized again, this time stepping fully into the dim light. It was a woman, her features obscured by darkness, yet her eyes glowed with an eerie luminescence, captivating and horrifying all at once. I stood frozen, caught in her haunting gaze. "You belong with us," she hissed, her voice a thread that wrapped around my mind. "Why fight against your true nature?" A wave of nausea washed over me as emotions surged violently, threatening to drown me. The darkness pulsed like a living thing, wrapping around my limbs, squeezing until I could hardly breathe. Memories flooded my mind, old fears, old pains, and insecurities unleashed in a torrent. "No!" I cried, shaking my head desperately as I willed the darkness away. "You're lying." I was losing my grip. Images swirled. Faces of those who had suffered had fought. I felt them tugging at my heart, a connection forged not just by their pain, but by my own. From somewhere deep within, a flicker of hope ignited. Channeling the strength of the pendant, I slammed my eyes shut and gathered all my courage. "I won't be chained to your darkness," I shouted, voice filling the air with trembling determination, forcing my light outward like a flare, igniting the night sky. The shift was instantaneous. The woman's laughter turned to an explosive scream, raw and piercing, as the darkness around me recoiled. I opened my eyes, and the world around me brightened with a power stronger than fear. "Your bond is broken," I declared, feeling emboldened fierce. The shadows spiraled in upon themselves, twisting and writhing as my light surged around me like a fire, devouring everything in its path. Yet, even as I fought back, I could sense them clawing together, reforming, the darkness drawing fragments of shadow from the earth, sculpting them into creatures that leered and howled. The laughter returned, cacophonous and halting, filled with rage and deep sorrow. "Foolish girl, you cannot escape what you are." It was chaotic chaos, shadows and screams swirling until I felt tempted to close my ears, drowning in the pitch of sound. But I wouldn't allow it. Clenching the pendant tighter, I stepped forward, gathering my resolve. The ground shook beneath my feet again, but this time, I felt a pulse ripple through the earth, growing stronger, and I realized that I wasn't alone in this fight. A flash of warmth washed over me, and from the corner of my vision, the outlines of those lost souls flickered into view, their expressions shifting from fear to defiance. They began to form a circle around me. "We will not yield," they cried, their voices merging into a single, resounding harmony. "We are many." Strength surged within me, drawing inspiration from their combined essence. I felt the shadows retreat slightly, the fear receding for just a moment under the power of unity. It was then that I understood. I had not freed them from the darkness. We were now linked in a bond forged from pain, and together, we could stand against the night. I directed that combined energy outward again, pushing back against the darkness, wielding both my light and their courage. "You think you can take us?" I shouted defiantly. "We are stronger together." The shadows hissed and writhed, but the surge of power only seemed to ignite their rage. They twisted and clawed, becoming frenzy of anger, eager to reclaim what they thought was theirs. "Join us!" They screamed in unison, but my resolve didn't waver. "Never!" I yelled, igniting the pendant one more time. Light expanded, consuming everything, drowning out the darkness. They shrieked, a sound so piercing it felt like daggers to my ears. But I pushed through the pain, pressing forward, believing that together we could forge a path to safety. "Stay with me!" I shouted to the souls gathering around me, feeling their energy merge with my own. "We'll break this!" The shadows reeled once more, their forms splitting and shattering, the dark power trembling against our collective will. I could feel the weight of their anguish slipping away like grains of sand caught in the wind. But even as I celebrated this fleeting victory, I sensed a deep, dark anger rising. The woman's figure loomed larger, an embodiment of the darkness, her eyes smoldering with fury. My heart raced, realizing that this fight was far from over. "Your light will extinguish," she hissed, her voice a serpent's whisper. "You cannot win against the abyss." And deep within me, I wondered, would I succumb? Would the darkness finally consume us all? Yet with the energy of the souls flowing through me, I found my answer. "We'll show you." I breathed, preparing for the next onslaught, ready to face whatever horror awaited. And as the shadows surged again, bearing down on us, I could feel the battle was only just beginning. The shadows bore down on us, thick and suffocating, swirling like a violent storm eager to extinguish our light. I could sense their anger, a chaotic energy that crackled in the air, heavy and laden with despair. But as the dark forms lunged, something inside me stirred, an instinct, a primal urge to fight back the encroaching nightmare. Heart pounding, I concentrated on the pendant. Its light flickered weakly, but refused to die, drawing strength from the spirits around me. I pressed my palms flat against the cool surface, feeling the energy pulsate through my veins, a connection growing stronger with each passing moment. "We can defeat them together," I murmured, more to myself than anyone else, the words like a prayer drifting into the chaos. As I closed my eyes, enveloped in that faint warmth, visions flooded my mind. Images of those who had suffered, screams of joy, and pain merged into a symphony of emotion. I could feel their hopes, their dreams. It was as if they were feeding into my determination, urging me to rise above the fear. Just then, the shadows began to waver, caught off guard by our sudden resolve, the whispering voices faltering for a heartbeat. But the woman, the embodiment of dark intensity, howled with agony, fury contorting her features into something grotesque. "You think you can defeat the darkness?" Her form shifted, growing larger, more chaotic. The shadows responded, twisting into sharp, jagged edges like claws reaching out to snatch me back into the depths. Desperation clawed at my chest, but I pressed forward, channeling all my energy into a brilliant ray of light. "We will not fall to you," I screamed, vision blurring as the light burst from the pendant, filling the entire space with a golden glow. For an instant, the darkness recoiled, and I felt a surge of power, the laughter, the eerie whispers fading to an unsettling silence. It felt like we'd struck a nerve, as if the shadows realized their hold was slipping. Yet, that moment of triumph was short-lived. The ground trembled beneath me, cracks forming spiderweb patterns across the pavement, as if the earth itself protested against the chaos brewing within it. I felt the air grow heavy with tension, a storm brewing that pulsed with a life of its own. The woman unleashed a deafening roar, shaking the very core of my being. "You are foolish to think light can hold back true darkness." Dark tendrils shot out like lightning, encapsulating my legs, pulling me down toward the yawning abyss that had suddenly split open at my feet. Panic coursed through me, icy fingers gripping my throat. I struggled against the hold, heart racing as shadows crept up my arms, threatening to bury me beneath their weight. "Help me!" I cried out, my voice barely above a whisper, but I felt the spirits rally around me, their light flaring brighter like a beacon calling out to the lost. "Together," I urged, drawing on every ounce of desperation to shake off the darkness. The spirits surged closer, intertwining with my own energy, forming a protective barrier around me. With a surge of unity, a wave of light erupted from our combined strength, battering against the dark forces that threatened to engulf me. I could feel the tension release as shadows shrieked in pain, scattering like leaves caught in a tempest. But the reprieve was only momentary. The woman glowered, eyes burning with a chilling fury, turning her nightmare into something more monstrous. "You think you've won?" she hissed, her voice slicing through the air, deep and mocking. "You have only begun to touch the surface of despair." What she conjured was unlike anything I'd faced before. Horrifying figures twisted and thrumming with shadows, delusions of my worst fears. They approached slowly, slinking toward me like predators stalking their prey. Their bodies writhed in grotesque mimicry of my past, faces eerily familiar, but distorted. They began to whisper, their voices a twisted collage of echoes, my doubts, failures, and regrets materializing before my eyes. "You will never be free," they taunted, the words dripping with malice, scratching to the core of my essence. "You are nothing," I faltered for a split second, the words burrowing into my mind. But just as they began to weave a web of despair, I regained my footing. "No," I forced out, shaking my head, feeling the warmth of the pendant pulse with life against my chest. "You can't have me." Channeling the strength of all the spirits tied to this battle, I hurled my energy forward. The glowing light erupted from me, engulfing the dark memories that stretched toward me. They screamed as the light coursed through them, rippling across their forms, dissolving their shape into the air like smoke. But even as the shadows dispersed, a chilling sensation crept back in, an echo of laughter swirling around me. "You can't escape the truth," the woman lamented, her voice now a haunting whisper. "Your darkness will always find you." I felt the very ground beneath me tremble again, and that cracking sound resonated as dark fissures spread across the landscape. It felt like the world was closing in, the edges of reality fraying like a decaying string. I had to fight against this. If they wanted my fear, they would not get it that easily. "Show us then," I shouted defiantly, a fire igniting in my chest. "Show me what you think you know." Darkness shifted, swirling and twisting above me, morphing into a swirling vortex that threatened to pull me in. I stood my ground, but the cold laughter eroded my focus. It felt as if the void beckoned me, an ethereal pull drawing me in, each heartbeat echoing with temptation. I could see familiar figures forming at the vortex edges, people I had lost, moments of anguish projected into surreal forms that begged for my attention. "Join us," they whispered sweetly, the voices luring me deeper into the swirling mass. "We want you back. We need you." A chill swept through me as I recoiled at their words, visions of my past nightmares hovering frostily. "No!" I yelled again, shaking my head violently. "I've come so far." Panic mounted as the darkness slithered tighter, searching for cracks and pulls to drag me inside. I closed my eyes, fighting to focus on the warmth of the pendant, feeling the spirits beside me rallying for one last stand. "Together," I called out, commanding the light within us. "Together we will push back. Together we are stronger." With that, I unleashed every ounce of light coursing through me. A dazzling burst shot forward, scattering the shadows and sending the grotesque figures reeling as they shrieked. The dark vortex swallowed a few of their own, the cries echoing into the infinite void. The world around me trembled, dark energy fracturing as the light surged fiercely against the tide. But just as I felt the momentum shift in our favor, I noticed the woman's face morphing again, shifting from anger to something darker, pleasure. "You think you've won?" she murmured, a smirk twisting her lips. Suddenly, she raised her arms, summoning darkness from the very earth itself. Shadows twisted and undulated together, growing into monstrous forms that eclipsed the light. Each shape bore twisted faces, mouths gaping wide in silent screams, and my heart sank, a wave of dread crashing over me. I realized then the fight was far from over. As the darkness surged once again, a sense of pure terror gripped me hard. I could feel the ground vibrating with the sheer force they thrummed with, threatening to drag me back into their realm of despair. "No!" I gasped, the weight of their energy pushing down on me, threatening to suffocate the light I had fought so hard to protect. But for every ounce of fear creeping back in, I felt a flicker of resolve. I couldn't let the shadows win, couldn't let them claim this victory. And in that moment, I understood something crucial. I wasn't just battling the dark outside. I was also fighting the darkness within. Embracing that realization, I took a deep breath, channeling all my lingering fears into a single point of radiant hope. I slammed my hand against the pendant, feeling it pulse with energy while the shadows closed in, suffocating in their density. "You will not take me," I yelled, asserting my power as I let loose everything I had. Light exploded, brilliant and blinding. It tore through the darkness, dazzling the monstrous forms, sending them shrieking back, their twisted features flickering in and out of existence. The energy wrapped around me, wrapping my spirit in warmth, bolstering my resolve until the fears began to fade slowly. But the darkness was still there, boiling just beneath the surface, waiting for a crack. I could sense it, hungry and relentless, ever eager to reclaim what it had lost. And I realized the next strike was not just against them. It was a true test against my own past, my own demons. Would I stand firm against the pain they offered? Or was I destined to succumb to that familiar embrace? As the darkness slithered closer, whispering promises of power and twisted comfort, I felt the edges of my mind fray, grasping at the threads of hope while balancing, precariously on the cusp of despair. This fight will not end tonight, I thought, feeling the weight of what was to come settle in my gut. It was a dark path I had to walk, but I wouldn't walk it alone. Together, I murmured softly, and in the beautiful glow around me, I knew I had to summon every ounce of strength left in me. And so the struggle continued, light and dark colliding in an eternal battle, within me and around me, with answers lying beyond the horizon, waiting just out of reach. I stood on the precipice of a choice, the darkness swirling around me, whispering in eerie tones that vibrated through the ground, rattling my core. The air was thick, pressed down on me like a heavy blanket woven from fear and despair. Each shadow danced with malevolent intent, and I could feel them stretching out, searching for my vulnerabilities, threatening to drag me back into their fold just as they had before. The woman's laughter twisted through the air like a haunting melody, her shadowy form morphing into grotesque shapes that promised to consume every flicker of light I had ignited within me. "You think your strength can withstand the coming tide," she taunted, her voice cutting through the oppressive gloom with an unsettling calmness. "You are merely a flicker, a candle about to be extinguished." I forced my gaze to remain steady, clenching my fists and summoning the light from the pendant. "You don't know me," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I've already faced my fears, and I will burn brighter than you can imagine." I felt warmth surge, a tentative light creeping like dawn breaking through the night sky. But the shadows responded violently. They surged forward, a writhing mass of darkness that clawed at my ankles and began dragging me towards that gaping abyss that had split the ground. It felt like ice against my skin, the shadows biting and gnawing at my spirit, desperately attempting to reclaim what they believed belonged to them. Heart racing, I dug my feet into the earth, channeling everything I had. As I planted my body, the sounds of the world around me grew distant, the chaos settling to an unsettling stillness, only to be pierced by the echoing cries of those lost souls. "Help us," they murmured, their voices fragile, like whispers carried on the wind, twisting and turning through the darkness. I could almost see their forms within the shadows, their faces etched with sorrow and desperation, merging into grotesque masks that mirrored my own fears. Each cry drew closer, wrapping around me, pulling me further into their realm. Suddenly, the light from my pendant flickered, dimmed by the overwhelming darkness. I gasped, feeling a chill creep up my spine as panic set in. "No, no, no!" I shouted, my voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't let the light fade. I couldn't let them win. I remembered the warmth of their spirits, their resilience merging with my own. Drawing on that strength, I closed my eyes tightly and summoned every ounce of courage, feeling the light echoing back to life. "I won't give in," I vowed, pouring my energy into the pendant until it pulsed like a heartbeat, brighter and mightier than before. The shadows screamed, a cacophony of rage reverberating through the air. They twisted violently around me, relentless in their pursuit, and I could feel their attempts to snuff out my determination. "You are weak," the woman hissed, her figure rising above the shadows like a dark queen. "Embrace what you are, what you fear. You are meant to be one of us." I opened my eyes, the pendant shining defiantly in my grip. Hazy figures floated just beyond the edges of my vision, faces twisted with loss and yearning, as if begging me to join them, join the darkness. An old memory flickered within me, a moment of doubt when I had almost surrendered, when the pain had felt insurmountable, almost too heavy to bear. But this time, I stood firm. "You want to overwhelm me?" I shouted, throwing my arms wide, letting the light cascade outward. It erupted into the shadows, illuminating the chaotic mass with a golden glow that chased the darkness far back across the land. For a moment, I felt untouchable, the light swallowing their despair, scattering them like dust in the wind. Yet the darkness, now agitated, lashed out. The ground shook violently beneath me, a tremor that seemed to emanate from the very core of the earth. With a deafening crack, the chasm at my feet widened further, and I felt a tug deep within my gut, a powerful pull luring me toward it. I could sense the shadows swirling closer, reforming and glimmering with an all-too-familiar hunger. This time, the darkness wasn't just the essence of my fears. It was poison, snaking into my thoughts with whispers of doubt that chilled me to the bone. "You'll always be alone, a flawed machine," they rasped enticingly. "Your friends, your light, they will fade in your absence, and you'll be left with nothing." I shook my head violently, trying to chase out those words, but they coiled around my mind like a serpent, squeezing tighter with each breath. The more I fought them, the heavier they grew, and the darkness seized the opportunity to creep in deeper, merging with my insecurities, twisting them into monstrous shapes that lunged at me, threatening to claw at the very core of who I was. "Just let go," the woman purred, her presence wrapping around me like a silk cocoon, seductive and sinister. "You don't have to fight anymore. Join us. Embrace what is yours." Anguish twisted in my chest. I could feel the ground crumbling beneath me, resonating with their promises. Visions flashed within me, faces of lost love, memories of all I had lost, swirling around like a storm threatening to sweep me away. Each flicker of that darkness twisted my heart, pulling me closer to despair. "I don't want this," I yelled into the tempest, desperate to break free before I lost myself completely. Then, I remembered the souls around me, their lingering strength and the warmth of their hopes. Grasping the pendant tighter, I found the courage to reach back. "No, this is not where I belong," I shouted, forcing my voice to carry through the darkness, my words rising above the haunting cries. "I will not let you take me." As if my defiance was a spark igniting a fire, the light within the pendant surged anew, radiating outward and flaring in all directions. I felt it ripple against the encroaching shadows, slicing through their grip like a blade. With one powerful thrust, the light expanded, blasting against the dark forms that writhed around me. Each flicker began to burn bright, forcing the shadows back in fury, screeching as their dark tendrils unraveled. But in their retreat, they lashed out in desperation, determined to take me down with them. Pain shot through me as a dark claw lashed at my side, ripping through the air with a hiss as it drew blood, sharp and stinging. I stumbled, the warmth of my light faltering for the briefest second, and a wave of fear surged in. The darkness pulled closer, twisted and jagged, looking for any sign of weakness. I felt that familiar weight pressing down, urging me to succumb to despair. I gritted my teeth, clutching the pendant as if it were a lifeline. "You will never have me," I shouted again, though the quiver in my voice betrayed my fear. "Not now, not ever." With every ounce of strength I possessed, I sent a burst of light rushing back to the shadows. It exploded outward, the energy pushing against their sheer force. But the darkness roared, a deafening cacophony melding their anguish and rage, saturating the air around me with palpable dread. Just then, through the haze, I caught fleeting glimpses of familiar faces, friends and family who had been shadows of memory. Their expressions turned from sorrow to determination, eyes bright with hope, fueling the fire within me. They reached towards me, pulling me to the surface of my resolve, igniting a spark of rebellion against the consuming void. Together, I yelled, feeling their energy coalesce around me like a whirlwind, igniting my spirit further. You cannot break us. In a blinding flash, I channeled that collective power, releasing a wave of light that shattered the air with a pulse of clarity. The darkness shrieked, evaporating into the ether as it recoiled in horror, and I felt the pull of the abyss wane. For a moment, it felt as if I had shattered the grip of fear, but the shadows were quick to reform, their essence merging once more behind the woman's pained visage. You think you can conquer me? She screeched, her eyes burning with ultimate rage. You only delay the inevitable. I braced myself, knowing the next wave of darkness would hit hard. But with every fiber of my being, I struggled to hold the light within me, channeling the strength of those around me, determined to push back the tide of despair that threatened to reclaim what I had fought so hard to protect. I'm not afraid of you. I breathed deeply, drawing in the light, the warmth from that burning pendant, feeling my spirit ignite with a relentless fire. What would come next, I could not know, but I would not give up. I would not fight this battle alone. And as the darkness surged back once more, I stood ready, prepared for whatever horror awaited, resolved to light the way. As the darkness surged forward again, I braced myself, my heart pounded like a drum in a tense silence. Shadows morphed into figures, twisting and contorting in unnatural ways, their faces obscured by a veil of despair. The air grew colder, wrapping around me like a chilling embrace as I struggled to hold onto the light that flickered within the pendant. Every inch of my being screamed for me to turn away, but I couldn't let the shadows claim me. With each step they took, my surroundings shimmered and blurred, making it hard to stay grounded. I could hear whispers again, hushed tones that slithered into my mind like serpents. You're so tired, they beckoned, echoing desires I had hidden deep inside. Join us. Let go of the fight. Accept your fate. A cold dread clawed at my chest. The faces within the darkness sharpened. Figures I recognized, lost friends and loved ones twisted into forms filled with agony. Their eyes were wide with pleading, mouths opened in silent screams. The very essence of my fears breathed to life, taunting me. Why fight? They seemed to chant, their voices swelling like a sinister chorus. We just want you home. I stumbled back, a shiver racing down my spine. No, I cried, clenching the pendant tighter. You're not real. This isn't how it ends. Suddenly, a dark mist poured forth, swirling around my legs, pulling me closer to the chasm. I could feel its icy tendrils wrapping around me, trying to pull me down into the depths of despair. The ground trembled violently beneath my feet, and I grasped at the air, struggling to keep my footing. In that moment, just when I thought I might be lost, I remembered the warmth of hope, the flickers of light surrounding me. I could almost see the spirits rising alongside me. They were there, bolstering my resolve. Together, I heard their voices echo softly, like a gentle breeze urging me onward. You have strength. You have us. As their whispers caressed my ears, I summoned all that warmth and love. Filling my lungs with a deep breath, I shouted again with the shivering pieces of courage I could muster. I am not alone. A brilliant light exploded forth, cascading around me like a golden waterfall, illuminating the darkness that sought to engulf me. This time, it felt unstoppable, spreading like fire through dry grass, roaring upwards as it met the shadows head-on. The figures hissed and recoiled, their forms twisting violently as the light grew, tearing at the edges of their darkness. No, the woman roared, her voice a guttural growl, shaking the very ground I stood upon. You will regret this. You won't escape destiny. Her fury manifested as a thick fog, rising against the tempest of light with a malevolence that chilled me. The shadows rearranged themselves into monstrous beasts that lunged towards the light, ravenous for the nourishment of fear. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural hunger, sharp teeth glinting menacingly in the dim light. My heart raced, pounding like the hammers of war. But I dug deep, feeling that warmth radiating within me, urging me onward. "I won't let you take me," I shouted again, and with all my might, I pushed the light outward, allowing it to envelop me completely. The blast erupted from my core, blasting against the encroaching shadows with a force like a tempest, scattering them in all directions. But then came the counterattack. From the depths, terror surged as the shadows began to coalesce into a solid mass, a swirling black abyss that threatened to collapse into itself, creating a vortex of doom. It loomed ahead, a gaping mouth swallowing everything in its path, pulling light and warmth into its nightmarish depths. Panic set in, the pressure mounting as the darker force throbbed with malevolent joy. The very air around me thickened, becoming almost viscous. I could feel it tugging at my very essence. It wanted me to give in, to accept the inevitable, to succumb to the darkness. I staggered back as the whispers grew louder, now a cacophony of anguish and longing. "Join us. It's easier. Just give in." The overwhelming tide pushed against me, and I began to doubt, my breath ragged as I teetered on the brink. Visions of my past flashed before my eyes. Every mistake, every moment of pain, the people I had lost. They swirled around me, shadows which seemed to reach out in despair, tightening their grip around my heart. I felt my resolve wavering, and that cold sensation seeped deeper into my core. This was the moment the darkness had been waiting for, poised to conquer every glimmer of hope I had left. Just then, a distant memory broke through the haze, a moment of joy, laughter shared under the sun. The feeling of warmth enveloped me like a soft embrace. "No," I whispered defiantly. "These are not my truths. I choose to light the darkness." Fueled by that fleeting memory, I summoned the pendant's power once more, every ounce of light within me converging forward until it burst forth in a dazzling eruption, igniting and expanding, illuminating the creeping shadows like 1,000 suns. It ripped through the heavy fog, tearing apart the veil of despair, pushing me back against the pulling grip of the abyss. But as the light surged, the darkness writhed and twisted, becoming even more feral. The woman's form shifted, her respect twisted into malevolence, spitting in fury. "You dare resist? You will suffer for this." Her voice echoed with fury, each word laced with venom, and I could see her becoming untethered, her power growing darker and more intense. The aura shifted, turning cold as skeletal fingers emerged from the swirling mass. They reached for me, desperate and hungry, trying to claw my soul back into the abyss. I gasped, reality thinning like smoke, grief and darkness threatening to swallow me whole. Each skeletal hand bore memories, moments of sorrow I had buried deep, piercing through my defenses. Faces contorted. In pain and betrayal flashed before me, a nightmarish reminder of things I wished to forget. "You are nothing," they shrieked, their hollow eyes boring into my soul. "You will always be ours." I felt the suffocating weight of despair pressing down on me, and panic gripped my chest. Just as I thought I might be lost to their grasp, I remembered the light burning within me. Realizing it was stronger than their darkness, I took a deep breath and focused hard. I am more than my pain. The warmth within ignited, blazing brightly as I pushed back against the shadows. It expanded farther than before, a brilliant shockwave that rippled through the air, illuminating the space and scattering the figures that threatened to pull me under. But even as the light engulfed the darkness, I felt tangible resistance. The shadows fought back, their shrieks filling the air like nails on a chalkboard. The air crackled with tension as the two opposing forces collided, each determined not to yield, until the ground beneath me began to split again. A monumental tremor rocked my surroundings, and I felt the world shift, as if reality itself was being tugged in opposite directions. The abyss widened ominously, pulling everything at its edge towards its depths, including me. But I was not finished. The light surged forth again, stronger this time as I let out a primal scream, channeling everything I had, every memory of joy and hope coiling within me. And I felt the penny drop. I wouldn't retreat now. Get back! I roared, and with one final thrust of power, I sent the radiant beam hurtling towards the abyss, lighting the air with an undying brilliance. It scorched everything in its wake, illuminating the darkness inch by inch. I could feel the energy crashing against the shadows, the roar of defiance echoing throughout the air, drowning out their anguished cries. I could see the woman falter, shadows clawing back from the light, stumbling away as if burned by its incandescent glow. Yet from the depths, an echoing laughter rang through the chaos, chilling me to the bone. "You think this is the end?" The woman cackled, her form flickering, morphing into a deeper darkness that coiled around her. "You have no idea what you've unleashed." As her laughter wrapped around me, it merged with an agonizing scream, and I realized the shadows were evolving. They began to coalesce into a singular mass, swirling ominously, an entity born of darkness itself. I gasped, instinctively taking a step back as the ground shook violently, and the shadows began to form a figure, towering above me with hundreds of eyes, each one filled with hunger, torment, and an insatiable desire to devour the light. This was not just the woman anymore. No, the darkness had birthed something far worse, something that bore the weight of countless souls lost. I realized in that moment, it wasn't just a mindless creature seeking despair. It was a compilation of all my fears, all my pain, all my regrets. And it was coming for me. With each pulse of its undulating form, a rush of fear shot through my veins. "You are doomed," it whispered, its voice a chilling blend of all the lost souls, echoing with their anguish, clawing at the very fringes of my sanity. It drew closer, insatiable hunger radiating from its very existence. Desperation clawed at my mind as I struggled to maintain my ground. I knew I couldn't show fear, yet as the darkness rushed forward, the weight of it pushed against my chest, stifling my breath. "Fight it!" I heard the soft voices of those spirits urging me on. It was enough to rekindle something within me. The flicker of light was still hidden deep inside, reaching out for me in the shadow's embrace. It was time to face this horror head-on, to push beyond the chains the darkness had forged in my heart. "I'm not afraid," I shouted once more, gathering that light with renewed vigor, steadying myself against the tides of despair crashing around me. Every ounce of strength within flowed outward, the pendant pulsing in harmony with my courage. The encounter was about to unravel, a final showdown between the light of my spirit and the oppressive darkness that threatened to reclaim me. In that moment, I knew I would fight, no matter the cost. As the shadows surged forward, I braced for impact, ready to converge with the light. And in the heart of that chaos, I pledged that I wouldn't face this battle alone. As I faced the relentless tide of shadows, I felt the darkness swell and pulse, a malignant heartbeat syncing with my own. The air was thick with dread, and the essence of despair clawed at my skin, whispering fears that snaked through my mind like tendrils of smoke. I steadied myself, my heart racing as the towering creature of shadows loomed closer. It eyed me with a myriad of glimmering orbs, each one a window into a soul lost to anguish. They flickered with torment, stirring memories of pain and sorrow. I had seen these faces before in my nightmares, loved ones I couldn't save, moments of failure frozen in time. I felt a wave of desperation wash over me, trying to break my resolve. They whispered my name, a sinister chant that slipped past my defenses, beckoning me into the void. "No!" I screamed, pushing against the weight of those dark memories. I drew on the light within me, letting it shine brighter, a beacon against the encroaching dark. The air crackled with energy as an aura of warmth surrounded me, a fierce reminder of why I was fighting. The darkness recoiled momentarily, but the creature was relentless. With a guttural roar, it lunged forward, an amorphous mass of despair, searching for any trace of fear to seize upon. I had never felt something so overwhelming, as if all the sorrow in the world was focused into one nightmarish form. I stumbled back, nearly losing my footing on the crumbling ground, which trembled beneath the fury of our clash. I could hear the echoes of long-lost souls shrieking as the shadows writhed, merging with the very essence of my fears. Each step of the beast sent ripples through the air. It twisted and warped, growing larger with every pulse. The deeper its growls resonated, the more I could feel my own resolve faltering. It reached out, tentacles of pure darkness slashing through the air, leaving trails of ice as they grazed my skin. I could see it now, the claws of darkness glimmering with malevolence, glistening like knives ready to tear through my very essence. I felt the brush of cold along my arms, and for an instant I was paralyzed by the bone-deep chill. The whispers invaded my thoughts, echoing with urgency. Join us in the pain, accept your fate. But just when I thought I might fall into that abyss, a flicker of warmth surged within me, igniting a flame of defiance. I choose my own fate, I shouted, voice breaking the silence around me, slicing through the heavy air. With that declaration, the light burst forth again. I raised my arms, channeling everything I had left, every ounce of hope igniting like 1,000 stars. The light bloomed around me, illuminating the darkness that sought to consume me. The creature shrieked, a sound that rattled my bones, a cacophony blending the despair of all those it had devoured. It staggered back, shadows swirling and thrashing as they tried to withstand the brilliance that poured from my outstretched hands. Yet its fury was no match for the light's tenacity. I pressed on, focusing my vision on the heart of the darkness. "You're nothing without fear," I called out, rallying my will against the overwhelming tide of sorrow. "You thrive on regret, but I will not be your vessel." As my words reverberated through the air, I felt a surge of power. The shadows retreated, writhing as if burned by the intense glow. With renewed determination, I surged forward, pushing the blinding light deeper into the heart of the abyss. For each step I took, the darkness squirmed as if in agony, begging to retreat. But the creature wasn't ready to give up. From within its roiling mass, it let out a deep, rumbling growl that echoed around me, a warning that sent chills down my spine. The shadows began to coalesce, forming jagged spikes that shot out towards me, sharp and lethal, their edges glinting with malice. I dove sideways, narrowly avoiding one that slashed past me, feeling the rush of cold air where it had nearly caught my side. Panic flooded my senses, but I couldn't let it win. I regained my stance, heart pounding like a drum, as I realized I had to confront this being, not just with light, but with a will stronger than the looming shadows. "Fight!" I yelled, not just to myself, but to the spirits that lingered around me, a call for unity. "We can do this together." I could sense their presence, felt the warmth pooling around me as they moved in sync with my light, riding the wave of hope through the swirling storm of darkness. With every ounce of strength, I directed the light outward, pulling the spirit's energy into my own. A vibrant wave surged forward, crashing against the dark entity. The shadows howled and split apart, fierce bursts of light igniting the abyss, illuminating the depths of my nightmares. Yet, just when I thought victory was near, a darker reality emerged. From the heart of the shadows, the woman reappeared, her face twisted and distorted, reflecting all the light I had cast. "Foolish child," she shrieked, her voice a terrifying harmony of rage and despair. "You think you can banish me just by shining light? I am the essence of all you dread. You are already mine." Her form shimmered and flickered, twisting into grotesque shapes, eyes multiplying and locking onto me, the stares penetrating like daggers into my soul. Each look seemed to render me vulnerable, dredging up deep fears of insignificance, of failure, of loss. I felt the weight pressing down, as if the shadows were trying to meld with my own insecurities, consuming my very essence. I gritted my teeth, refusing to succumb. "I won't let you take me," I shouted, my voice filled with defiance despite the rising panic that threatened to drown me. With that declaration, I gathered all the light I could muster, letting it pulse and thrash within me like a caged beast. "I am not weak," I cried, releasing it in a magnificent arc, bathing the malevolent figures in blinding brilliance. This time, the light was not just a shield. It was a weapon of hope, striking at the heart of the shadows surrounding me. But the darkness lashed out fiercely, striking with more intensity. I could feel the shadows wrapping around me, their weight dragging me back toward the edge of the abyss. But I fought against it with every ounce of strength left within me. I refused to be consumed by the depths of despair. Together, I felt the spirits urging, their bravery merging with mine, fortifying my will in the swirling chaos. "We are stronger than this." Spurred on by their encouragement, I pushed hard against the shadows. The light exploded outward again, illuminating every crevice of darkness, each flicker banishing shapes of dread. The monstrous figure trembled, its form flickering wildly as light infused the very core of its being. But it wasn't over yet. With a scream that echoed through the void, the darkness began to fold in on itself, the shadows swirling like a storm, ready to strike out one last time. In that moment, fear clawed at my gut, but I took a deep breath, reflecting on everything I held dear. I focused on the friends who had stood by me, the joy we had shared, the warmth of love that far outweighed the cold grip of sorrow. In that clarity, I found my resolve again. "Enough!" I shouted, channeling every ounce of love and light I could muster, creating a shockwave that surged through the darkness. "You will not take what is mine." The world erupted as the shadows recoiled, shrieking in a cacophony of rage. I felt the very fabric of reality quiver beneath my feet, threatening to unravel as the light blazed. But I had to push through. With one final surge of willpower, I drove the light deep into the heart of the darkness, feeling it crackle and pop against the entity's walls of sorrow. The impact felt like a stunning blow, as if I had pierced the core of despair itself. The creature writhed and screamed, its shrill cries piercing through the night. It shattered, splintering into 1,000 tiny shards of darkness, each one flickering and fading into nothingness, mingling with the light, finally erased. I staggered back, breathless and reeling, as the echoes of their cries faded into silence. The ground stopped trembling, and a hush fell over the land, leaving me standing alone in the aftermath of chaos. But the victory was bittersweet. I looked around, struggling to catch my breath, haunted by the faces of those I had lost along the way. Were they finally free, or had I merely sent them deeper into the shadows? I could still feel the remnants of despair lurking at the edges of my consciousness, whispering and taunting, like a loose thread threatening to unravel everything I had just fought for. I had faced formidable horrors, but the road ahead was bound to be treacherous. I took a step forward, adrenaline coursing through me, resolute to uncover the truth hidden beneath the residue of shadow. The darkness had been banished for now, but I sensed the darkness had merely retreated, preparing for its next attack. What lay ahead remained uncertain, but I wouldn't run. I chose to be brave. With the flickering glow of hope at my side, I vowed to face whatever came next. Together with the spirits of light that had fought alongside me, I pressed on, determined to reclaim my path. As I pressed on, the eerie silence weighed heavily around me, the quiet unnerving. Not a soul stirred, not even the wind dared to whisper. The atmosphere hung thick like a curtain, and I felt the remnants of the abyss lurking just out of sight, ready to pounce. The shadows that had only moments ago been my enemy felt like an echo, a memory of something that was still very present. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding hard in my chest as I advanced into the dim light. Ghostly remnants danced in the corners of my vision, fleeting images like smoke, shifting shapes that seemed to lead me deeper into the unknown. Every step sent tremors through the ground beneath me, as if the earth itself held its breath in anticipation. The air grew colder, and with it came the unmistakable scent of decay, a rancid reminder of what had lingered in this haunted place. My pulse quickened as I spotted flickers of shadow melding together, coalescing into shapes that mimicked figures from my past. Ambiguous forms that looked almost human, yet twisted and contorted, their faces a parody of anguish. The vision was chilling, an impression of despair etched into every feature, their haunting gazes trailing after me as I walked. "Don't let them touch you," a voice crept into my mind, echoing my thoughts. It was muffled but distinct, a warning not to succumb to the faces that called out to me. The shadows shifted, beckoning with skeletal hands, their whispers slithering into my brain like oily smoke, repeating my name in a mocking tone. "Come back! You belong here." I shook my head, violently, stepping back as dread flooded my chest. My very identity felt threatened by their haunting allure. I turned my back and pressed on, deeper into the ghostly haze surrounding me. But as I continued, my surroundings warped into an unsettling realm. The air thickened further, and the dim lighting cast bizarre shapes around me, shifting as if alive. It felt like the shadows of my own doubts were creeping out of their corners, emboldened by my fear, ready to swallow me whole. Panic squeezed around my heart as I caught glimpses of my past failures, flickering like film strips stuttering across a projection screen. I saw glimpses of friends I had let down, opportunities squandered, and paths I had walked but regretted. Each memory was sharper than the last, cutting into my resolve. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted, and I could see my breath hanging in the air like fog. I turned sharply, feeling an icy presence behind me, a breath that sent a wave of cold seeping into my bones. I could sense it stalking me, a dark shape with no form, a predator that thrived on my vulnerabilities. As I turned, I faced an immense wall of shadow, an inky darkness that absorbed all light, standing sentinel in my path. It seemed to pulsate, reeking of despair and hopelessness, and I could feel it reaching for me, tendrils of darkness curling in the air like serpents. I was paralyzed for a moment, the sheer dread squeezing the breath from my lungs. But as the shadows slithered closer, I summoned every bit of light I had inside me. "Leave me alone!" I yelled, pushing the warmth forward, trying to break through their cold grip. The light flared brightly, pushing them back slightly, giving me the tiniest sliver of hope. But the darkness only twisted and swirled in response, a chorus of taunts that echoed around me. "You can't escape," they whispered, voices blending together, a chilling chant that seeped into the air, wrapping around my ears. "You're lost. You've always been lost." The ground beneath my feet cracked, and I stumbled slightly as the shadows seemed to lash out toward me. I felt a sharp sting on my arm, like claws raking along my skin, and I glanced down to see the faint lines of red carving into my flesh. With every pulse of pain, the shadows swirled with renewed excitement, a sickening delight in my suffering. I gasped, resting my arm back in a futile attempt to shake off their grip. I took a step back, clenching my fists, resolving not to be a victim in this nightmare. But the darkness was relentless. I noticed more forms emerging from the depths, figures that seemed twisted and grotesque, their bodies shifting and stretching unnaturally, eyes bulging with a ravenous hunger. They moved with an uncanny grace, weaving through the swirling shadows as they drew closer, each one a reflection of my own fears. Their mouths stretched open, revealing jagged teeth that glistened with malice, hungry for my light. I could see their eyes, hollow and void of any warmth, no humanity left within them. They were otherworldly, nightmares personified, prowling the fringes of my mind in search of weakness. I turned and ran, heart racing as I fled from their grasp. My breath came in ragged gasps, the cold air burning my lungs. I wasn't just running from them. I was running from the essence of all that I feared within myself. The darkness closed in behind me, the ground cracking and collapsing, the very earth beneath me threatening to devour me whole. I didn't dare look back, fear driving my feet to quicken, almost losing my footing as I stumbled through the haze. That's when I heard it, an eerie melody drifting through the darkness, a sweet sound that sent shivers down my spine. It danced on the edges of my consciousness like a lullaby sung from the depths of despair, luring me with its somber tone, promising an end to my suffering. I pushed harder, the need to escape overpowering my senses. But something about the song drew me closer to its source, beckoning me to listen, to give in. I shook my head violently, blocking out the sound, forcing myself to concentrate on the light, the warmth that pulsed within me, the flicker that was my only weapon against the encroaching darkness. Finally, I burst into a larger chamber, an immense void that swallowed all but the light I carried with me. My heart sank as I realized the very walls were seeping shadows, swirling and shifting, twisting like living creatures, eager to enclose me in their grip once more. In the center of the room, a pulsing darkness took form, an epicenter of despair that dripped with malice. And at its heart, I could almost see remnants of lost souls swirling, crying out in desperation, their cries muffled by the oppressive heaviness of the air. I could sense it. The darkness was aware of my presence, feeding off my fear, growing stronger with every flicker of my hope. The malevolent energy radiated around me, and I felt my light being drained, flickering like a candle in a tempest. The shadows began to converge, morphing together into a singular entity. It reached towards me, tendrils curling and coiling, seeking to ensnare me. "Join us," it hissed, voice dripping with the sweetness of deception, promising sweet release from the burdens I carried. "You will be free here, with us." I could feel the seductive sway of the shadows, the way they beckoned me with a false promise of peace. "Don't listen," I screamed at myself, breaking free from their enticing spell. I gathered my light, holding it out before me like a shield. "You will not take me," I declared, pouring every ounce of willpower into that radiant glow, letting it expand beyond my grasp. The light erupted, filling the chamber with a brilliance that made the shadows recoil, shrieking in pain and fury. I could see the outlines of the lost souls flickering in the veil of darkness, their anguished faces merging with the chaos. "Help me!" I cried out, my voice echoing against the choking silence. "Together, we can fight." In that instant, the remaining flickers of light began to stir around me, responding to my plea. I could feel their energy mixing with mine, creating a surge of warmth that pushed against the cold that surrounded me. With a collective force, we drove the light outwards, pushing against the darkness, trying to consume us. But as the shadows writhed, I felt the atmosphere shift, and I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was battling for every soul trapped in this nightmare's grasp. Even as the world around me seemed to shatter, I knew I had to stand firm. I remained vigilant, my heart racing as the cacophony of shadows roared, a terrifying anthem of despair. I would not falter. With every ounce of strength, I pressed on, my light igniting the very air I breathed, cutting through the darkness, racing towards the source of despair that now towered before me. And with that, the true battle had only just begun. As I stood there, a swirling tempest of light pushing against the encroaching darkness, I could feel the air crackle with tension, like a brewing storm ready to unleash chaos. The shadows were restless, writhing and seething around me, their murmurs escalating into an ear-splitting crescendo. They twisted together, forming grotesque shapes, some so vivid it felt like they could reach out and touch me. The shadows slowly began to merge into more defined figures, emaciated faces, hollow eyes, their mouths twisted into silent screams. The sight was nauseating, each visage a reflection of torment and despair. I realized these faces were familiar. I could see the people I'd lost over. The years, drawn from the depths of my memory, reminders of anguish that scarred my heart. "Why do you fight?" one shadow whispered, its voice a throaty rasp that sent shivers down my spine. "You will join us soon. Embrace the darkness. It will end your pain." I shook my head furiously, gripping the light defiantly. "No!" My voice cut through the dismal air, a rallying cry against the despair surrounding me. I wouldn't let them take hold. I wouldn't allow my sorrow to drown me. Suddenly, the ground shuddered violently beneath my feet. The shadows vibrated with excitement, rippling like disturbed water, and the walls of the chamber seeped darkness as if they were alive, pulsating with hunger. I was standing on a threshold where reality felt tenuous, like it was dissolving into the abyss. Each tremor sent waves of unease through me, and I swayed, struggling to keep my footing. From the spiraling shadows, a creature began to take shape, a towering mass, its form constantly shifting, glistening with wet darkness. It loomed over me, its elongated limbs stretching and contorting, mimicking the grotesque movements of a puppet with tangled strings. Its eyes, two sunken pits of shadow, bore into my soul, and I felt its oppressive gaze drinking in my resolve, savoring my fear. "I am your regret," it growled, a sound that reverberated through the air like thunder. The walls echoed its words, and I could feel the shadows thicken, trying to weave themselves around me, squeezing tighter like a vice. I gasped, pushing back against the weight of despair. "I will not be chained by you," I shouted, channeling my fear into strength. The light within me flared, igniting the dim chamber with a brilliant glow, pushing back the encroaching shadows. But the creature laughed, a sound both haunting and chilling, a twisted echo of mirth that split the air. "Foolish child, you think your light can defeat me?" It lunged forward, and I stumbled back, nearly losing my footing as the ground crumbled beneath me, revealing a chasm of swirling darkness below. I peered into the abyss and felt a pull, an insidious whisper inviting me to fall, to surrender everything to the depths below. With that, the fear amplified, surging through my veins, but I forced myself to focus, using the overwhelming terror to fuel my light. I summoned every glimmer of hope and courage buried deep within. The light responded, intensifying as I held it in front of me like a shield, forming a barrier against the monstrous creature. "Stay back," I yelled, taking a daring step forward. "You cannot have me." The darkness shrieked in protest, a cacophony that rattled my bones, causing my heart to race. It lashed out with tendrils, each strike laced with sharp pain as I felt them brush against my arms, a reminder that the shadows were still deliberate in their torment. I could feel the creatures pulling my darkest memories into view, reminding me of the times I had faltered, the moments I wished I could take back. Images flashed through my mind like a broken reel, each pulse recalling loss, regret, and fear, dragging my heart deeper into despair. Yet, in that moment of overwhelming darkness, I remembered the warmth of love, of laughter, the faces of those who had believed in me. The thought lit a spark deep within, igniting the courage I held so tightly. "Light!" I called out, pouring everything I had into it. A blinding explosion erupted from my core, illuminating the chamber with a radiance so intense it shattered the shadows into fragments that spiraled into the air like ashes. The suffocating darkness retreated momentarily, shrieking in rage as I pressed forward, feeling the pulse of determination coursing through me. But the creature was relentless. Riven shadows snapped at me, grasping and tearing, hungry for my light and my spirit. I pressed on, the glow surrounding me a shield, but I could feel the shadows creeping back, their fingers curling around my legs, pulling me downward towards the abyss. It was then I saw it, a glimmering doorway at the far end of the chamber, barely visible through a veil of darkness. It pulsed softly, a hopeful beacon calling me away from despair. Could I reach it? I had to try. I surged forward, dodging tendrils of despair, each step a struggle against the overwhelming weight pressing in on me. The shadows clawed at my skin, icy fingers that sought to immobilize, to drag me down into their depths. My heart raced with every inch I gained, the glow flickering around me like a candle in a storm. "Come back," the voices wailed, desperately entwined in a cold caress. "You belong to us?" "No." The word burst from my lips like a lifeline in the chaos. I could not fall prey to their calls any longer. Instead, I let loose a powerful scream, driving the light forward with unwavering intensity. With every ounce of will, I hurled the light at the darkness, feeling the energy pulse and expand in a brilliant wave. The shadows screeched, ripping apart like tattered fabric, the vibrant energy clashing with their oppressive weight, illuminating the chamber in a cascade of shimmering light. For a fleeting moment, the air felt lighter, and I glimpsed the figures of lost souls reaching out, their mouths moving as if in silent gratitude. With every pulse of the light, I felt their presence growing stronger, merging with my energy in a bond forged through suffering and hope. Encouraged, I raced towards the door, ignoring the gnashing sounds of the creature behind me and the fading whispers of regret. I could almost taste my freedom, a sweet, intoxicating promise that drove me forward. But just as I reached what felt like sanctuary, the ground trembled violently again, and the shadows surged back with a furious roar, all-consuming. I felt the pulse of dread clawing at my back, dragging me again towards the darkness, a wave of despair sweeping over me. I stumbled backward, feeling the edge of the abyss just inches away, the shadows reaching for me like lost hands yearning to reclaim what they had lost. In that critical moment, I remembered the warmth of laughter, the smiles of those I loved. Gathering every ounce of light, I hurled it toward the door, hoping against hope that it wouldn't be too late. As the light surged forward, illuminating the walls of oblivion around me, I felt the shadows scream in rage, tearing at the edges of my existence. I closed my eyes for one brief moment, focusing intently on the people who had filled my life with moments of joy. "Let me go!" I shouted into the void, feeling the bond of love shatter the chains of despair. With a blinding flash, I surged through the doorway, everything else consumed by the radiant blaze of energy, and in the next heartbeat, I felt an exhilarating freedom wash over me. But the shadows were not gone. Their presence lingered just beyond the threshold, a constant reminder of what I had faced. As I emerged into the new realm, I wondered whether I had truly escaped, or if this was merely a new chapter in a relentless nightmare. Would I ever truly be free? I stepped through the doorway, expecting relief, but instead I was met with a chilling silence that absorbed all light and sound, like stepping into a forgotten graveyard. The air felt thick and cold, wrapping around me like a shroud, and an unsettling dread settled heavily in my chest. I glanced around, noticing the walls draped in a dark fog, swirling with movement that seemed almost alive, drawing me towards an indescribable sense of foreboding. A narrow path stretched out before me, lined with twisted trees that loomed like silent sentinels. Their gnarled branches reached down, claw-like, as if to grasp at my very essence and drag me back into the shadows from which I had just escaped. Movement caught my eye, and I turned just in time to see flickering figures darting between the trees. Shadows that flitted too quickly to discern, yet I could feel their eyes boring into me. "Stay close," a voice whispered, laced with urgency. It was soft, almost gentle, but something about it sent a shiver down my spine, an echo of warning buried under layers of dark honeyed tones. I felt drawn to it, unable to resist the way it wrapped around my senses, promising solace amidst the overwhelming unease. I hesitated before inching forward, the light inside me flickering as if questioning my choices. My heart raced. Was it safety I sought, or merely another trap? With every step deeper into the forest, the shadows thickened, swirling like a tempest trying to part the misty atmosphere. There were whispers now, too, soft, melodic, enticing, coming from all directions. The sound was beautiful, yet sinister, like the haunting call of a siren luring sailors to their doom. "Join us," they beckoned, voices rising and falling, filling the air with an almost tangible tension. I felt my hand reach out involuntarily, fingers brushing against the bark of one of the trees, rough and wet. A shock surged through me, visions swirling to life, memories shadowed by grief, laughter tinged with sorrow, ghostly faces that flickered in and out of existence. "Please," a familiar voice echoed, lost in the cacophony. I grabbed my head, trying to block it out, but it was too late. I could see the outlines of loved ones, fading figures that reached toward me through the obscuring fog, their faces twisted into expressions of anguish as they were swallowed by darkness, disappearing into the shadows. Panic coursed through me, panic mixed with a terrible guilt. "No!" I shouted into the void. "I can't save you." But the moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. They fell like stones, sinking into the abyss of despair surrounding me, smashing on unseen rocks below. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted, thickening again with despair and anger. I felt a rush of wind that smacked against my face, leaving an icy chill in its wake. The shadows began to twist violently around me, shapes elongating into dreadful figures that loomed larger than life. My instincts screamed to run, and I turned on my heel, bolting down the path, every ounce of fear urging my legs to move faster. Each step felt heavier, the ground beneath me seeming to throb with a dark heartbeat. I could hear their whispers growing louder, echoing my name in a sickly, sweet rhythm, mocking my fear. "Why do you flee? There's no escape." I noticed snaking roots wrapping around my ankles, pulling at me like tendrils of vine, reaching, grasping. I stumbled, nearly falling face first into the damp earth, my heart thudding violently against my ribs. I could feel the suffocating grasp of despair clutching at me, a reminder that the shadows were relentless, that they knew my fears. With a surge of adrenaline, I pulled myself free from their grasp, resisting the urge to look back. Desperation drove me forward, each breath a battle against the fog that threatened to consume me. I could feel my lungs burning, each inhale a struggle against the freezing air that refused to fill me. Then, ahead, I spotted a flicker of light, like a star amidst a storm. Hope surged within me, drowning out the voices whispering doubt. Desperate, I pushed my way through the trees, ignoring the branches that clawed at my skin, determined to reach that distant glow. But as I moved closer, the light shifted, illuminating swaths of darkness that revealed horrific scenes, twisted figures writhing in agony, trapped in a nightmarish waltz of despair, their faces contorted in silent screams. I halted, recoiling at the sight. "Help us," one figure cried out, reaching toward me with skeletal hands, eyes wide with pleading. "You can save us." Gripped by panic, I shook my head furiously. "No, I can't." Their cries worsened, transforming into a dissonant choir, a cacophony resonating through the air. "Join us. Embrace the darkness." It became unbearable. I turned away, forcing myself to keep moving toward that flickering light. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out the chilling chorus that echoed in pursuit. As I drew nearer, the light grew brighter, illuminating dark corners and revealing endless forms of sorrow. I could see figures that resembled those I had lost, reflections of my guilt manifesting in grotesque, shadowy forms. Intangible, yet so painfully close. Their sorrow wrapped around me in a suffocating embrace, suffusing the air with grief. When I finally reached the light, I found it emanated from a doorway framed in ancient stone, shiny and untouched by time. That light pulsed softly, and I felt warmth envelop me, luring me to step forward. I hesitated again, feeling the shadows retreating, waiting for my decision. "Once you enter, there's no turning back," a soft voice warned from the threshold. Its tone was sincere, yet laced with a hint of sorrow, urging me to take the final plunge into the unknown. Rational thoughts fought against the desperate need to escape. "What lies beyond?" I whispered, glancing back at the figures still clawing for my attention, their faces twisted in misery. Freedom, replied the voice, soothing yet distant as though the source were just out of reach, hidden behind the welcoming glow. With a deep breath, I crossed the threshold, feeling a rush of warmth wash over me. The light enveloped me, and for a moment, the agony faded, washing away my fears. But I should have known better. As the warmth surrounded me, it morphed into something suffocating, wrapping tighter around my throat until I could barely breathe. I felt the shadows reaching back toward me, their icy fingers grasping at my ankle, unwilling to let me go. "Welcome back," the voice from the doorway chirped, but now it was layered with malicious glee. My heart sank, unease flooding through me once again. The walls closed around me, the light flickering with a life of its own, swirling like a storm, reflecting the chaos I had just passed through. It felt alive, malevolent, and I began to understand that the light itself had its own darkness buried within. "Embrace who you are," it beckoned, and I recognized the whispers from before, comforting yet menacing, promising both understanding and torment. My thoughts raced, the pull of the darkness clawing at my mind. Fear surged again as the shadows surged, filling the corners of the chamber with twisted forms, screaming and writhing in agony. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, desperate yet determined to fight back. The choice was never yours. A chilling chorus echoed through the chamber, each voice melding into one, mocking me from every corner. The walls began to close in, the air shrinking, making it difficult to breathe. "No, please." But my pleas fell on deaf ears. With renewed horror, I saw the figures I thought I had left behind advancing closer. My failures, my sorrows, manifesting before me, grinning with wicked joy. In that instant, I realized I had not escaped. I had only walked deeper into their lair, the realm of shadows where despair reigned unchecked. The light flickered one last time before dimming, my heart pounding furiously as the echoes of countless whispers joined in a deafening crescendo. "You are one of us now." This was not the end, but a beginning, a descent into darkness unlike any I had ever known. And as I looked around, I understood that the shadows were not just outside of me. They were a part of me. Would I embrace the darkness and let it consume me? Or could I rise again, stronger than the shadows that sought to define me? The choice loomed, and I was left standing on the precipice, staring into the abyss. I stood there, barely able to breathe as the shadows twisted around me, pulsing with life. Their whispers grew louder, drowning out my thoughts, wrapping themselves around my mind like thick vines. "I can feel you," they hissed, their voices slithering through the air, teasing and taunting me. The figures, once familiar, now wore expressions of malice and joy, their once soft features warped into grotesque masks of misery. I tried to turn away, but the shadows pulled me closer, refusing to let me escape their sinister grasp. "Join us in the shadows," one figure crooned, its voice sweet as poison. The others echoed the sentiment, their chorus rising and falling like a sinister lullaby. "You know you want to. You can't fight it anymore." I felt a cold trickle of despair slither down my spine. The shadows beckoned as if they were woven from the very fabric of my fears. The stale, damp air became heavy, suffocating, thick enough that I could taste the bitterness of anguish on my tongue. "Why do you resist?" Another voice twisted around me, low and rhythmic. It felt like a dance, a macabre ballet designed to ensnare my mind. "You belong with us, where pain is shared and sorrow binds." The ground trembled beneath my feet, the very foundation of this place alive with my terror. I looked down to see cracks forming in the earth, shadows spilling through like ink and water. They seeped into my shoes, crawling up my legs, clinging to me with an unbearable weight. Desperation clawed at my throat as I fought against them. I stumbled back, the light within me dimming as I struggled to pull free. "I won't join you." I refused to give in. I cried out, my voice trembling but tinged with defiance. But inside me, I felt a flicker of doubt, a tiny spark that whispered, "Maybe this is where you belong." The idea rattled me, like a loose stone falling in the silence, echoing louder and louder in my mind. Suddenly, a deafening silence fell. The whispers ceased, as if they were holding their breath in anticipation. In the stillness, I heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping, echoing deep in the chamber, growing louder and more chaotic, resonating like a beating heart. The walls trembled as the tapping morphed into frantic scratching, like claws against stone, accompanied by a sound that sent ice slithering through my veins. The unmistakable shuffling of something that shouldn't be there, something not fully formed, yet impossibly real. I turned, heart racing, to see shadows pouring from the walls, shapeless but expanding. As they took form, they became something surreal and unholy, a creature with elongated limbs nearly collapsing under its own weight, eyes that glittered with starved malice. It moved jerkily, like a broken puppet controlled by unseen strings. My instinct screamed at me to run, but paralyzed by fear, I could only watch as it wobbled closer, its head tilting awkwardly as if trying to understand the world, or me. I could hear its breath, ragged and wet, like the rustling of dead leaves in a storm. It opened its mouth, revealing rows of jagged teeth, slick with darkness, and let out a low, rumbling growl that vibrated through the air. "Come closer," it hissed, the words chilling me to the core, icy fingers wrapping around my heart. "What do you fear?" That question pierced me, cutting through the paralysis of fear. A flood of memories rushed back, losing loved ones, feeling helpless, the endless chasm of regret that gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. "Do you fear pain?" The creature continued, inching closer, its hand outstretched, claws glinting in what little light remained. "Or are you afraid of forgetting?" My heartbeat quickened, drowning out the whispers that tried to lure me into submission, encouraging me to embrace the darkness. "I fear that I am lost," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, refusing to back down even in the face of such darkness. The creature paused, its gaze unervingly penetrating, as if it was weighing my words, gauging the depths of my fear. "Lost? Yes, that is a familiar feeling," it mused, as though savoring the complexity of my emotions. Its hand twitched, fingers curling as though it desired to reach into my chest, to pull out my sorrows, my fears. In that moment, I saw shadows pooling at its feet, beckoning to me, craving my despair, eager to fill the void. "Embrace it," the whispers tried again, pressing against my mind, vying for control. "Let it absorb you. Rediscover the parts of yourself that have been buried." I could feel the weight of their words pulling at me, an invisible tether wrapping tighter and tighter around my soul. Yet, something deep inside resisted, the light flickering in my core, sparking with the urge to fight back, to push through the barriers of darkness that sought to envelop me whole. "No!" I shouted, even as my body trembled against the force of what was happening. "I will not succumb." The creature recoiled slightly, the shadows flaring in response to my defiance. It seemed startled, caught off guard, as if surprise flickered across its grotesque face. "Then you will suffer all the more," it hissed, its voice dripping with venom. "Your defiance will only start your descent." With a roar, the creature lunged at me, its claws outstretched and gleaming, the darkness swirling around it, eager to consume. I scrambled back, heart racing, adrenaline flooding my veins, propelling me away from its grasp. I tore through the door, back to the other side, a panic-stricken instinct guiding my movements. But with every desperate step I took, shadows surged along the ground like restless serpents, reaching for my ankles, pulling me back toward the pulse of darkness and despair. The chamber around me warped, the walls pulsating in rhythm with my heartbeat, warping under the weight of my terror. I could feel my resolve begin to crack, the voice of doubt whispering insidiously. "What if you cannot escape?" it murmured, wrapping itself around me like a cold embrace. "What if this is all that awaits you?" I shook my head, trying to dismiss the thought, but the shadows skittered around me like spiders, dark and probing, each touch sending electric jolts of fear through my body. "You cannot resist forever," they chanted, their voices melding into a terrible symphony of desperation. Then the air shifted, the cold atmosphere swirling around me like a hurricane. I felt the ground beneath me tremble, and the shadows shifted to reveal a cavern deeper than I could comprehend, a yawning void that seemed to pulse with a sinister heartbeat. As I stood at the precipice of the chasm, I knew the darkness was not just an enemy. It was an ancient hunger, a gaping maw that sought to consume every glimmer of hope within me. "Choose," the voices chimed, resonating through the air. "Embrace us, embrace the void, or be swallowed whole." With every ounce of will left in me, I grasped the remaining light inside. "I will not give in," I screamed into the abyss, feeling the light flickering defiantly against the consuming shadows. And in that moment of defiance, I gathered everything I had, every ounce of strength, every flickering hope, and hurled it into the darkness, igniting my surroundings in a brilliant explosion of purity. The shadows screamed as the light blossomed, and for just a moment, I could see the truth beyond. The figures I had lost standing in the brilliance, their faces calm, their hands reaching for me, inviting me to join them in the light. Desperation surged as I realized that they had not succumbed to despair. They had transcended it. With every ounce of courage I could muster, I leaped into the light, leaving behind the echoes of sorrow and pain, pushing against the tide of darkness. But just as I felt their warmth embracing me, the shadows clawed back, tendrils of despair seeking any remaining fragment of my essence to drag back into their realm. I focused on the faces of those I loved, remembering their laughter, their strength, a beacon in the suffocating dark. The memories mingled with my courage, erupting into a blinding light that surged from within, pushing back against the shadows that aimed to consume me. "No more!" I cried, feeling the radiance intensifying, a radiant explosion cascading throughout the abyss. Shadows recoiled, their form twisting and breaking apart, shrieking in rage as the darkness for the first time faltered against the light. As the colors exploded around me, I felt the clawing shadows recede, realizing that the barrier of despair separating me from the light was crumbling. With a final push, I willed myself through the thick barrier, tearing into the vibrant world beyond, my heart racing as I broke free from the consuming depths. But even as I emerged into the dawn, I knew the shadows would linger at the edges of my mind, waiting for a moment of weakness to creep back in. I would have to fight them constantly, every day, every moment, to ensure that I never gave in to their insidious promises again. For even now, I could hear their whispers lurking just beneath the surface, a reminder that I had faced them, that the darkness had tried to claim me, but I had resisted. "Stay strong," I whispered to myself, feeling the dawn warming my skin as I took a deep breath. I had escaped, but the journey was just beginning. The shadows were still there, always lurking, but now I had the light to guide me, and I would not fear the darkness anymore. I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the dawn wrapping around me. But even as I stepped into the light, relief was a fleeting emotion. The air shimmered with the whispers of the shadows, their remnants still clinging to me like a bad memory. I could feel the pulse of darkness thumping beneath the surface, waiting for a chance to reel me back in. As I walked on, the world around me began to shift. The trees that once stood tall seemed to lean closer, their branches twisting and curling, almost like skeletal arms reaching out to intercept my path. The sunlight flickered through the leaves, creating unsettling patterns on the ground, each shadow stretching and warping into shapes that danced just beyond the corner of my eye. I tried to shake off the feeling, but it was like trying to rid myself of a persistent ghost. Each rustle of leaves echoed a warning. Each sound warped into a whisper that sent chills down my spine. "We are still here," they seemed to echo. "We are always with you." Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of something darting between the trees, an unnatural figure flitting through the edges of my vision. I whipped around but saw nothing tangible, only the dense underbrush swaying as if having missed the fleeting presence. My heart started to race again, pounding in my chest like a drum signaling danger. Stay calm, I told myself, willing my breath to steady. But the more I tried to calm myself, the more frantic my surroundings became. The whispers turned to laughter, cold and mocking, as though they were reveling in my growing dread. I quickened my pace, pushing forward along the narrow path, the undergrowth closing in around me like a vice. Just ahead, I noticed an old, dilapidated cabin nestled among the trees, buildings no longer a part of the world I recognized. Its windows were shattered, cracked frames giving way to tiny, staring eyes of darkness. I could almost see the shadows pooling inside, thick and rich, begging me to enter, promising to reveal all the painful secrets I tried so hard to bury. I hesitated, dread pooling in my stomach. The very sight stirred unsettling emotions within me, the call of despair resonating deeply. What's the worst that could happen? The shadows seemed to taunt, their voices blending into a sinister melody. Against every instinct screaming at me to run, I approached the cabin, drawn in by the pull of mystery and fear. The door creaked open as I pushed it, revealing an interior shrouded in shadow. It was darker than I expected, an impenetrable void where light dared not linger. As I stepped inside, the air grew colder, wrapping around me like icy fingers. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, echoing the sound of my heart, reminding me I was alone in this foreboding space. I glanced around, taking in the crumbling walls adorned with faded portraits, faces void of color, eerily frozen in expressions of terror and sorrow. Each step deeper into the cabin felt like a step back into the past, a past filled with guilt and hidden regrets. I felt eyes watching, the portraits seeming to shift, their gazes drilling into my soul, asking unanswered questions. The shadows in the corners twisted ominously, swirling like a dark mist, seeming to breathe, urging me to leave nothing unturned. Suddenly, I heard a low whisper coming from the far side of the room. I strained to listen, my heart thumping in sync with the soft drumming of fear. Help us, it beckoned, sounding both like a plea for salvation and a trap to lure me closer. Compelled, I moved toward the sound, my feet dragging against the floor as though the cabin itself wished to keep me there forever. I found a dusty old trunk in the corner of the room, half hidden beneath a tattered cloth. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, crawling inside my mind like an invasive thought. Open it. Against my better judgment, I knelt beside the trunk and lifted the lid. A cloud of dust burst forth, swirling around me like the remnants of forgotten dreams. Inside, I found a jumble of old letters, their edges yellowed with time and dampness. I pulled one out, the faded ink barely legible, but the words heavy with meaning. They cannot escape, it read. They are trapped in the shadows of sorrow, tethered to the past. As I read, the air around me thickened, a suffocating pressure pressing down on my chest. I felt cold fingers grazing my arm, sending a jolt of terror through me. I dropped the letter and scrambled back, heart racing as I caught a glimpse of movement behind me. Shadows merged into flesh, transforming, taking shape before my eyes. A figure stepped from the darkness, a woman with hollow eyes and a grim smile. "You shouldn't have opened that," she said, her voice hollow and echoing like death itself. My blood ran cold as I recognized her. It was a fleeting image from my past, someone I had loved and lost, returning only as a memory turned dark. Her presence felt overwhelming, sucking the warmth from the room as shadows writhed around her, forming tendrils that reached toward me. "Don't you remember me?" she asked, tilting her head. "I was the one left behind, the one who saw you forget. You have come home." I stumbled back, panic surging through me, pushing against the shadows that clung to the walls, coiling and hissing as they watched. "No, this isn't home," I shouted, my voice breaking as sobs threatened to surface. "You're not real." "Yes," she whispered, stepping closer, her smile widening until it sea. Med to split her face. I am as real as the darkness inside you. The darkness you tried to escape. But here it can finally have you. As her form shifted and morphed, shadows lunged forward. They wrapped around my body, becoming a heavy weight that bound me, squeezing until I could hardly breathe. Their voices became a cacophony, drowning out my thoughts with their commands. Join us, you cannot resist. Let go. With every ounce of strength, I fought against their pull, desperation kicking in. I won't surrender, I cried, trying to summon the last remnants of the light I had found within myself. But the tendrils of darkness tightened, forcing me to relive every moment of pain, every mistake I had buried deep. Vision blurred. I felt as if I were being pulled into a deep hole, the memories flooding my mind, the faces of those I had lost, the moments I wished I could take back. Their voices layered above the shadows, creating a dissonant symphony of regret. Through the chaos, one memory pierced through, the warmth of love, the laughter that wrapped around me like a comforting blanket. I grasped onto it tightly, pushing back against the abyss threatening to swallow me whole. You are not my past. You are not my future. With a force stronger than I knew I had, I screamed out, I choose to live. And as those words escaped my lips, blinding light erupted from my core, illuminating every corner of the cabin, igniting the dark tendrils, incinerating the shadows that clung to me. Each scream of the darkness filled the air as the light poured through, flooding the cabin with a warmth that burned away the lingering memories, the regrets, sparking freedom. I felt the ghostly shape of the woman waver, confusion flickering across her face as the light consumed her, erasing her presence from my mind. Let go of me, I shouted, struggling to tear free from the weight of despair. With each heartbeat, I pressed forward, embracing the light within me, willing it to surge forth. The shadows shrieked, their laughter fading as the warmth washed over me, dissolving the grip they held. Darkness fled, retreating back into the corners, dissipating like smoke under a blazing sun. Finally, I stumbled out of the cabin, breathless and gasping for air. The forest felt alive, but in a different way. The branches now swayed gently, the whispers fading into the breeze, leaving behind a sense of calm. I turned back to see the cabin, now just a shell of its former self, slowly disappearing into the foliage, becoming nothing more than a memory. But I knew that the shadows wouldn't give up so easily. They would always linger, their voices always waiting to echo in moments of weakness or doubt. I had fought them off this time, but a part of me wondered how long it would be before they returned, clawing at my soul again. With determination and the essence of light now firmly rooted within me, I stepped forward into the clearing ahead, knowing I had to confront my fears and tether them to the light, rather than allow them to drag me back into the dark. And as I walked away, the promise of a new beginning bloomed before me. But I couldn't shake the feeling. My battle with shadows was far from over. I could feel them lurking, poised at the edge of my mind, waiting for the moment I would falter in my resolve. As I continued down the path, each step felt heavy, the ground squishy beneath my feet, like it was trying to swallow me alive. The trees loomed taller, the branches twisting into unnatural shapes, almost alive with menace. A chill slithered down my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, the faintest whispers barely perceptible, carried on the wind, curling around my mind. The forest grew denser and darker, shadows creeping over me as the sunlight dwindled. The air turned stale, heavy with an unsettling tension. I started to walk faster, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my chest, each beat echoing the fear building inside. With every glance over my shoulder, I half expected to see something emerge from the trees, but instead, there was only emptiness and a sensation of darkness growing. Suddenly, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and an overwhelming sense of dread washed over me. I wanted to turn back, to retrace my steps to the warmth of the light, but the idea of facing the shadows again felt even worse. I heard a faint sound, a rustling behind me, My breath hitched, and I quickened my pace, moving deeper into the heart of the forest. Ahead, I noticed a flicker of light, dancing as if inviting me closer. Driven by curiosity and desperation, I stumbled toward it. The light pulsed softly, almost like a heartbeat, and through the twisting branches, I could see a clearing up ahead. As I stepped into the open space, I was met with a surreal scene. A circle of ancient stones, each etched with strange symbols that glowed faintly, casting eerie shadows all around me. The light felt warm and almost alive, but as I stepped closer, the air shifted. A sharp chill pierced through my skin, and the shadows lurking just outside the circle seemed to bend and writhe like a living creature. "Help us," a voice echoed again, but this time it was louder, more desperate, whispered in the rustling leaves and the creaking branches. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling, but the response only deepened the unease growing within me. A figure materialized at the edge of the clearing, a child, with hollow eyes and an impossibly wide smile that stretched unnaturally across their face. "We've been waiting," the child said, their voice sweet, yet entirely void of warmth. "Do you want to play?" "No," I replied, backing up instinctively. Something about the child felt wrong, as though they were more shadow than flesh, a twisted reflection of innocence. But the child only laughed, a sound that echoed eerily, filling the clearing with a sensation of dread that made my skin crawl. Then behind the child, figures began to emerge, distorted shapes, faces grinning with madness, eyes filled with an insatiable hunger. They circled the edge of the clearing, shadows stretching toward me, reaching out like desperate hands to draw me into their embrace. The warmth of the stone's circle flickered, and in that moment, I realized it was a barrier, one that was slowly deteriorating under the invasion of dark energy. My heart raced as realization sunk in. I was surrounded. "Join us," they sang in unison, a haunting melody that threaded itself into my mind. "Join us forever." The words wrapped around me, heavy as chains, and I could feel the pull of despair clawing at my heart, whispering of acceptance and release from the pain that lingered from the past. "No!" I screamed, digging deep into my resolve, knowing that succumbing would only feed their darkness. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear the visions of my regrets that danced before me like flames. A sharp pain shot through my chest. I stumbled as the symbols on the stones flickered violently, flickering between light and shadow. The figures advanced, their grins growing wider, excitement radiating from them as if my fear nourished their existence. Their laughter crescendoed, reverberating through the clearing, turning from gleeful to monstrous, a sound that stirred ancient terror deep within my soul. Then I remembered the light I had found in the cabin, the same light that had pushed back the darkness that tried to consume me. Somehow, I had to summon it again. I focused inward, feeling for that flicker of warmth buried beneath layers of dread. My breath quickened as I closed my eyes, calling to it, willing it to respond. "Please," I murmured, drawing strength from the memories of those I loved, of moments filled with laughter, warmth, and light. I envisioned that radiant glow bursting forth, fighting back against the encroaching darkness. "I am stronger than this." As if answering a silent prayer, a brilliant light ignited within me, pushing outwards, illuminating the shadows and banishing their cold touch. The light swirled around me, cascading over the sinister figures, who shrieked and recoiled as it advanced. I opened my eyes, and there they were, their faces contorted with rage and fear. Yet, even as they stumbled back, I could feel the shadows still lurking, biding their time, waiting for me to falter. "You can't escape." A voice slithered from the depths of the shadows, slick and smooth, saturating the air with dread. "We will always wait." Undeterred, I felt the roots of the clearing, the ancient stones anchoring my resolve. I focused on those symbols, feeling their power resonate through me, urging me to press forward. The laughter and whispers faded as I stepped out of the confines of their circle, surrendering to the surge of light that now enveloped me completely. I surged forward, charging the shadowy figures as they attempted to reform around me. "You don't have power over me," I shouted, the words booming with newfound confidence. The light erupted, exploding outward, engulfing the malicious shadows in a fiery brilliance. For a moment, silence fell as the shadows shrieked, their forms dissolving into wisps of darkness, swirling away like smoke in the wind. I felt weightless, as if I were being swept by a wave of freedom. But as I stood amidst the ruins of shadows, I caught a glimpse of something moving near the edge of the forest, a flicker of darkness taking shape, watching me with countless eyes. A shiver ran down my spine. The darkness had retreated for now, but I knew, deep inside, it was far from finished. I had faced the shadows that lurked within the depths of my mind, but they would inevitably return, and their laughter would always echo in the recesses of my thoughts. It was a battle without end, a dance between light and dark that I would have to navigate for as long as I drew breath. Determination surged within me as I stepped away from that clearing, knowing the light I had drawn from my memories would be my shield. I would face each encroaching shadow that dared to approach. I would not be a mere victim of despair. I would brave the storm until the very end. And so, with each footfall, I ventured deeper into the unknown, ready to confront whatever darkness lay ahead. Because I understood now, even the deepest shadows could never extinguish the light within. I pressed onward, my heartbeat echoing in my ears like a drum signaling my own reckoning. With determination fueling my steps, I traversed the winding path further into the woods, thick branches hanging low, clawing at my arms like desperate hands. The feeling of being watched intensified, an invisible force lurking just out of sight, stalking me with patience, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As I walked, the light around me dimmed again, thick fog curling around my feet and creeping higher towards my waist. It felt heavier than air, an oppressive blanket that masked the world around me. I shivered, the temperature dropping sharply as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that twisted and curled like dark serpents slithering through the underbrush. In the distance, I heard a faint whisper, calling my name with a soft, chilling urgency. "Come closer, don't be afraid." It echoed from all directions, its source hidden among the twisted trees. A sense of curiosity gnawed at me, but dread flooded my senses. I stopped, heart racing, trying to locate the origin of the voice, but it seemed to flicker like an elusive flame. "Is someone there?" I shouted into the dense fog, my voice trembling but determined not to betray my fear. But the only response was silence, heavy and suffocating, wrapping around me like a snake ready to strike. Just when I thought about turning back, something shifted in the trees ahead. A faint flicker of light emerged, faint yet mesmerizing, like a firefly dancing in the dark. I hesitated, battling the urge to move closer. My instinct screamed for me to run, to escape whatever horror lay at the source of that glow, but my curiosity proved stronger. I approached slowly, each step sinking deeper into the fog as I spotted an old lantern hanging from a crooked branch. As I reached for it, the lantern swung gently, as though someone had just touched it. But I was alone. At least, that's what I told myself. My fingers brushed against the cold metal, sending a jolt of shock through my fingers as I felt an icy chill radiate from it. And as I pulled it closer to my face, I noticed that the glass was smudged with something dark and viscous, almost resembling blood. I recoiled, the realization slamming into me like a wave, the echoes of laughter returning to taunt me. The laughter morphed into low growls, rising around me, surrounding me like a pack of wolves closing in on their prey. I looked around, but the shadows were shifting and blending into each other, forming nightmarish shapes that danced at the edges of the lantern's weak light. With my heart pounding, I backed away slowly, the laughter morphing into distorted whispers. "You shouldn't have come here," they hissed, their voices wrapping around me like barbed wire. Panic surged. I turned and ran, my breath coming in heavy gasps as I pushed through the fog, branches whipping at my face and tugging at my clothes. Every footfall became a thundering echo, urging me to flee faster, to escape the unseen pursuers lingering behind me. I stumbled into the underbrush, the ground uneven and treacherous, and in that moment of chaos, I lost sight of the lantern and the path altogether. Panic twisted my gut as I sprinted blindly, fear urging me onward into the unknown. But the laughter grew louder, echoing through the fog, twisting into a song that pierced through the veil of my thoughts. "You will never leave," they chanted, voices commingling in a cacophony of nightmares. I could feel their presence behind me, shadows creeping ever closer, their cold breath brushing against my neck like icy fingers yearning to drag me back into their embrace. Just as I began to lose hope, I saw a flicker of movement ahead, a break in the trees. Bursting through what felt like a wall of darkness, I emerged into a small clearing, the moonlight pouring down like a spotlight. The chill in the air faded slightly, but I didn't feel safe. In the center of the clearing lay a stone altar, aged and covered in patches of moss. A grotesque figure stood before it, a twisted being with hollow eyes that gleamed in the moonlight. It was draped in tattered shrouds, and from a distance, it appeared to be a shadow that had taken a physical form. It moved so unnaturally, as though every part of it was jilted, jerking its head to gaze at me with an expression that held both curiosity and hunger. "What do you seek, child of light?" the figure croaked, a voice like gravel scraping against stone. I froze, rooted to the ground as a wave of dread washed over me. I swallowed hard, trying to find my voice. I just want to go home. Home is but a concept, it hissed, lunging closer, revealing a mouth full of jagged teeth that dripped with shadow. "The shadows will claim you, and your screams will fill the void. There is no escape, only acceptance." My breath caught in my throat as instinct screamed at me to run. I was trapped in an ancient ritual, one that had ensnared countless souls before me, and the atmosphere throbbed with dark energy as the shadows began to swirl around the altar, forming grotesque images that laughed and wept in unison. Desperate, I turned to sprint back into the woods, my legs moving with frantic urgency, but the shadows tightened around me, their slick forms slipping underfoot like oil on water. Just then, I stumbled into another hidden path, its edges illuminated dimly by ghostly wisps of light floating erratically. My heart raced as I realized it might be my way out. I darted forward, adrenaline pushing me beyond exhaustion, each step echoing in the eerie silence that followed. But with each stride, the shadows howled louder, their voices rising in menace. "Come back! Accept your fate!" they cried, their laughter spilling out like a torrent, each note full of malice and desire, beckoning me to return, to give in. But I had faced their darkness before, and I wouldn't yield so easily. Summoning all the strength I had left, I charged into the depths of the forest, the ghostly lights leading me on a treacherous path forward. The branches clawed at me like sharp nails, but the glow grew stronger, guiding me through the maze of shadows. With my heart pounding, I focused on the way, banishing the voices that tried desperately to pull me back. I could see now that this path was alive, pulsing with its own energy, drawing me closer to safety. Finally, as I broke through the last layer of trees, I found myself standing at the edge of a precipice overlooking a vast abyss. The ground beneath me trembled, and darkness swirled far below, screaming with the voices of those who had been lost before. I felt hopelessness creeping in, but I saw something incredible, a bridge of light arching across the chasm, its glow bathing the edge of the abyss in a warm, inviting radiance. Without hesitating, I leapt onto the bridge, the light enveloping me as I raced forward. The laughter grew fainter behind me, and the darkness retreated as I hurried along the path of light, stretching into the unknown. The shadows lashed out from the edges of the abyss, seeking to reclaim me, but the strength of the light propelled me forward with an unwavering push. I was not done fighting. I would continue onward, facing the shadows that came, finding strength in the light that lingered within. The night may hold terrors I couldn't yet comprehend, but I had tasted the sweet spark of fighting back, and I knew I could face anything waiting just beyond the next bend. I raced across the bridge, the light enveloping me in a protective embrace, but the shadows writhed beneath like a restless beast, clawing against the brilliance, trying desperately to pull me back. Each step I took felt like a precious gift, but I could sense the darkness gathering its strength. The laughter grew more furious, its sound echoing off the chasm like a haunting melody that promised despair. As I reached the midpoint of the bridge, the air thickened, swirling with an oppressive force that felt alive. My heart pounded, and I glanced back, just for a moment. The shadows had formed a monstrous figure, vast and grotesque, twisted into an amalgamation of every fear I had ever known. Its eyes glowed like ember, filled with rage and hunger, and its mouth stretched wide, revealing a cavernous void filled with writhing darkness. "You can't escape," it roared, the voice shaking the very foundation of the bridge beneath my feet. Panic surged through me, freezing my limbs, but I forced myself to focus on the light ahead, that warm glow beckoning me onward. I could feel the bridge vibrating, sensing my fear and the shadows closing in. Faster, I whispered to myself, pushing my legs to move despite the weight of dread. The abyss below roared with fury, and I felt the chilling idea that it was hungry for my surrender, wanting to consume my very essence like it had done to others before. Each footfall was now charged with urgency. I could hear the dark whispers wrapping around me, taunting me in a chorus of voices that sounded familiar, faces of those I had lost and memories that threatened to drown me in grief. "Stay with us," they echoed, their words curling around my mind, tempting me to give in, to join their eternal dance of despair. "This is where you belong." But I shook my head, forcing thoughts of the past away. I remembered the light within me, the warmth of hope pulsing like a heartbeat. I focused on that warmth, letting it fill every inch of my being, illuminating the creeping shadows that sought to devour me. The further I moved forward, the more the darkness shrieked, echoing off the abyss, desperate to reclaim its prey. Finally, just as the figure loomed closer, its maw yawning wide to devour me, I leaped, propelling myself toward the light. I felt the sensation of weightlessness as I flew through the air, energy surging with a fierce intensity. I landed on solid ground, heart racing, adrenaline coursing through my veins, the chasm of darkness behind me roaring in anguish. The moment my feet hit the ground, the shadows recoiled, shrieks of rage filling the air, but I didn't look back. I pressed onward, the path before me now lit with a brilliance that promised safety and solace. As I walked, the light enveloped me, a protective shield against the encroaching darkness that sought to drag me back into its suffocating embrace. Then, the landscape shifted, trees transforming into bright flowers as I stepped forward. The air felt lighter, the sound of the abyss fading behind me. I was free. As I stood in that newfound space, I took a deep breath and finally allowed myself to feel the relief wash over me. The shadows that had haunted me now, just a distant memory. But as the euphoria settled in, a shiver crawled up my spine, reminding me that the darkness would never truly disappear. It lingered close, eager, waiting for moments of weakness. I understood now that my battle was not simply against shadows lurking in the woods, but the fears lurking in my own heart. I would have to remain vigilant, for the night might hold more terrors than I could ever imagine. The light within me shone bright, but I knew I had to nurture it, to allow it to grow, as I prepared to face whatever came next. The fight was far from over. I would carry my light into the unknown, prepared to confront my fears. The shadows could laugh, they could watch, but I would walk forward. Because this journey was mine, and I was ready to claim my strength against the darkness.